Hello and welcome everyone to today's session on the Sustainable Renewable Future Summit from the Indian Chamber of International Business. Today we are going to be talking about the business of renewables, the business of recycling, the business of sustainable products and services, of conservation, clean energy, water, electric vehicles, battery minerals, and definitely we're talking about the future. It's been a change in the environment around us since the last decade or so. What we have seen in the last decade has surpassed a lot of things that we must have not even imagined until about 20 or 30 years ago. So this is something that has opened our mindsets, changed our attitudes towards our surroundings, towards the climate, towards our earth. Today's event is not only going to be talking about the conservability, the recyclability, and the sustainability conservation, but it's going to be also talking about the business aspect of it. We've all seen how grants work, how subsidies work, how the governments are taking initiatives to bring about climate change mitigations. But we're going to be talking about the business, the people that are connected to this trade, they're connected to the products, to the services, and how the ecosystem is coming together and bringing about this change in the earth that we are living. So today's session is going to be all about all of us coming together and making a difference. Today we're supported by Invest India, US Commercial Service, the US Trade and Development Agency, US Grains Council, and USAID, in addition to a lot of other supporters, a lot of other chambers that have supported us in today's event. So I welcome you all on behalf of the Indian Chamber of International Business, and we would like to begin with the national anthem of both the countries. A little bit about a few lines about the Indian Chamber of International Business that I would like to inform all of you all. The Indian Chamber of International Business is a chamber of small and medium businesses based out of India predominantly, but we are present in about 41 countries across the globe. In addition, our membership base is about 2,800 odd, that's spread quite a diversified area throughout the country. And we are having 8 offices in various cities across India. We are supporting our members through industry academic initiatives to push through the government policies, to support for various initiatives, to increase their businesses, for joint ventures, for imports and exports, of course, in addition to any other business or support that the Chamber of Commerce is doing. So with this, I would like to begin today's session on sustainability and renewability as we see it as business. I would like to welcome our today's guest of honor, Mr. Mohan Naidu Kinjarapu. He's a member of parliament at the Lok Sabha, and he's also the member of the Parliamentary Committee on Agriculture. Mr. Mohan Naidu Kinjarapu is a member of parliament of the 17th Lok Sabha from the constituency of Srikakulam in Andhra Pradesh, a Purdue alumnus and an MBA graduate from Long Island University. He first became an MP in 2014 at the young age of 27. Currently, he is the youngest National General Secretary of the Telugu Desam Party, the TDP, and the Lok Sabha floor leader of the TDP. Mohan Naidu has represented India at the 72nd session of the United Nations General Assembly in the 22nd meeting of the First Committee of Disarmament. He's also the youngest parliamentarian to be honored with the Sansad Ratna Award for his overall qualitative performance and individual efforts. Mohan Naidu believes that young people have a major role to play in politics. To forward this idea, he started an internship program, Politics for Impact, to increase opportunities for youth to participate in politics and governance. During his 2 terms as MP, Mohan Naidu has been vocal about various issues, including farmers' issues, fishermen's issues, unemployment, railway zone for Andhra Pradesh, and women's issues like their health and sanitation. He's been a strong champion of women, speaking in the parliament about women's safety, raising a demand for law on sex education and gender sensitization in schools, and protesting the taxation of sanitary napkins. A young father himself, he's been vocal about equal participation of men in raising children and has recently submitted a private member bill on paternity benefits. We welcome you, sir, today to today's session on behalf of the Indian Chamber of International Business. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Manpreet, for the wonderful introduction. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from India to all the members across the world. And I'm really pleased and honored to be the guest of honor today to address this digital gathering for the Sustainable Renewable Future Summit 2021. And I special thanks to the International Chamber of International Business and Mr. Manpreet Singh, the president, for inviting me for this. And the focus of this summit is definitely very timely indeed. And over the next 20 years, India is set to experience the largest increase in energy demand in any country worldwide. Traditional emission-based intensive fuel resources still fulfill 80% of the demand right now, but the renewable energy sector in India is making rapid strides, and it is eyeing for a place at commanding heights for the Indian economy. And with a target of achieving 175 gigawatt capacity of renewable energy by 2022 and 450 gigawatt capacity by 2030, India is in the middle of one of the largest renewable capacity expansion programs in the whole world. Approximately 4.7 trillion rupees have been invested in the country's renewable energy space in the last 6 years alone, and with an expected 1 trillion rupees investment opportunity annually till the year 2030. And in 2020, India was ranked 3rd globally regarding its renewable energy investments and plans. In fact, the World Economic Forum's Energy Transition Index 2020 has singled out India as one of the only 11 nations to have made consistent and measurable progress on the energy transition. But to really appreciate India's aggressive push for renewables, we all must look at the states and the leadership. And for that, I want to take the example of my own state of Andhra Pradesh under the leadership of Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu during the tenure of 2014 to 2019. A report was published by the Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy, which found that Andhra Pradesh is one of the 5 states which are most likely to drive the renewable energy push in the country of India. And political leadership of AP played a very key role in the push for renewables under the leadership of, like I said, Chandrababu Naidu. During 2014 to 2019, Andhra Pradesh has added 7 gigawatts of renewable energy installed capacity within 3 years, which was 10% of nationwide renewable energy capacity and 30% of our own state's total generation capacity. And 2 ultra mega solar parks of 1,000 megawatts capacity were installed in the state, one in Anantapur and one in Kurnool. And it was due to the efforts of Chandrababu Naidu that the whole AP was started focusing on energy storage also. And it was the first time the world's first thermal battery plant was also inaugurated in Andhra Pradesh. AP allocated more than 100 acres for energy storage projects, and AP signed MOUs with Tesla also in the fields of renewable energy storage. So when a state becomes very proactive in kind of getting this push towards renewable energy, these are some of the benefits that you kind of get from it. And for the promotion of renewable energy, the new and Renewable Energy Delivery Corporation of Andhra Pradesh, a separate department was also set up, and simultaneously AP undertook rapid, wide-ranging business reforms to attract investments. And thanks to the efforts of Chandrababu Naidu, AP also became the #1 in the ease of doing business during his tenure. So the reason I mention this is, whenever we talk about India, we talk about at the national level, we talk about the central government, we talk about the central policy making around the renewable energy resources. But if you look further deep into the states, what the states are doing, how the states are coping up with this idea of renewable energy, that is where the opportunities kind of spread up. And the list of such initiatives become endless. The broader national push for renewables only work when the individual state and the leadership shows similar enthusiasm, which manifests into concrete initiatives on the part. AP saw their national push and that there is a significant investment potential, and we made the best of that opportunity. We aggressively pushed for renewables through our own initiatives, and like I said before, we actively sought for new partnerships in terms of technology, investment, and promotion also. And that is why during that 5 years of experience we had in our state, I would like to mention 3 important aspects that we saw in this renewable energy sector that might be useful to a lot of the people that are attending this gathering here. And the first one is having the states as key players in this renewable energy push. A sustainable renewable future has subnational stakeholders like the states and local entities, which are the local bodies, as key drivers of renewables. That doesn't mean that the central government would play a diminished role. On the contrary, we would need nationwide policy making and regulatory reforms to navigate through energy transition. However, this would entail a synergetic center-state collaboration where the center proactively engages with the states in long-term planning and treats states as equal partners. And that is what is the whole states are looking at, is that the states should play a significant say in national level decision making as well. The conditions, geographical conditions, the diversity, the culture, the priorities, the opportunities, they all differ from state to state. So you can't just take a national policy at the national level and say that this applies for all. The states know best what they require. When the states have a proactive role in national level decision making on renewables, the modalities can be customized as per the need of the states. That way, you can also mitigate the possibilities of center and state confrontations over renewable policies. Post facto policy disagreements also between center and states can be avoided if this kind of system is followed. So the most key important factor in policy making in a country like India is taking states also as key players in the decision making of renewable energy resources. And the second aspect, the most important one, is creating a just transition pathway where you don't leave anyone behind when you're making this progress into the renewable energy resources. Energy transitions are just like any technological transitions that we have. They have the potential to include or exclude based on who you give access to and for what purpose. This manifests in many ways depending on the fault line. If I want to share an example, it would be of the 4G mobile networks that have rapidly spread in the last 4 to 6 years. When these kind of technological intervention of high-speed internet was brought in, there were generations which were introduced to it and many generations which were left behind also. If you look at the elderly generation, if you look at mostly the women in the rural areas, they were not able to access the smartphones which were suddenly introduced and the high-speed internet. So in terms of this, India, if you compare this kind of example to renewable energy resources, there is somewhat a divide between the urban and the rural areas. There is somewhat a divide between the privileged class, the upper middle class, and the poorest of the poor, which has different way of viewing towards the renewable energy resources. So one could argue that in addition to the issue of affordability, there is also a paucity of renewable energy products which are suited to the conditions of Indian rural areas. And this is ironic because it is rural areas of India where renewables have the highest utility. So sometimes the fault line could lie at the national borders where the countries lack the know-how on making, if you look at another example, recently we are passing through the worst pandemic of our lifetime, the COVID crisis. And there are a lot of countries which are not able to produce the COVID-19 vaccine. And how do we cope up with this kind of situation? The countries which are able to have the know-how of making the vaccine, they have to share that kind of technology with this different countries which are not able to cope up. They have to help them, give them a helping hand and try to get everyone together. And similarly, in terms of renewable energy resources, there are technological developments across the globe, and different countries are at different levels. When there is an equilibrium, when there is a good way of passing the know-how between these countries, because the way I see it, this climate change or the renewable energy resources, it is not limited by geographical boundaries. It is not a problem of just one country. It is the problem of the globe. So everyone needs to go together. Everyone needs to walk together on this path. So it is important to not leave anyone behind in the struggle. So it is important to share the know-how across different countries, across different organizations, which is where I see an organization like ICIB playing its part, because it is trying to facilitate between different organizations, let it be business, let it be non-profit, or different kind of players, individual entrepreneurs who are coming onto these kind of platforms and trying to gain something out of this. So ICIB has an important player in plays an important role in trying to bridge this kind of gap in terms of know-how or the technological transfer from one place to another. So a sustainable renewable future should leave no one behind, and it will have just transition pathways that protect and improve the economic and social well-being of workers and communities in that process. Because after all, if you talk about sustainability, it should be all about justice. And it comes to the third and most important aspect of this renewable energy transition, which you want in the future, is the energy choice. The conversation of renewables needs to evolve beyond binaries. Transitioning to renewables requires one to embrace constant change due to innovations and technological improvements. But then how much are we willing to change, or how much are we willing to accept before we consider it to be unproductive? And if we are pushing ourselves for renewables, are we expecting that the existing petroleum refineries or coal-fired thermal power plants to be dismantled at one point, thereby laying off thousands of workers? Or are we willing to reskill them and employ them into these kind of renewable plants, which are the way for the future? So this kind of, when the policy making is being done, there has to be a smooth flow, a smooth transition. While you are trying to encourage renewables, there has to be a market dynamics in play, which offers a fair play for each and every player in the market also. So there has to be a sustainable renewable future should be based on the principle of expanding energy choice. This could ensure that within the framework of a policy, we push for the renewables, but market dynamics of competition, they also continue to operate. This gives a fair chance to all stakeholders involved. It is also a great way to get consumers to buy into the transition of renewables. And in such a scenario, the government can play a major role in investing early, which is the most important aspect. If you're looking at this renewables, is the critical research and development activity. R&D is must, and it has to be boosted. And that is the role that the government has to stress upon. And if a government is trying to keep its mind free from all other activities and stress more upon the R&D, then it has to keep the market dynamics in place so that there is no shocks coming from the market when you're trying to aggressively push these renewables. So in conclusion, the main three aspects that I mentioned, I just want to repeat, which are the states as the key main players, and just transition pathways, and the providing energy choices. If the government can look at these three important things while it's trying to make its policies in trying to improve or promote renewable energy resources, then we'll be able to achieve the kind of targets we are set towards. And this is what a sustainable energy future should be based upon, in my view. or at least in the future, we should aspire to be at this kind of stage where all these kind of issues are addressed and the proper flow of know-how is happening across the globe. And coming to the present scenario, I think it's a wonderful gathering right here. I've just had a brief introduction with some of the important members here, and I'm very, very confident that with people like you, with organizations like these, many of the difficulties that the government finds in getting the first-hand problems, because sometimes for the government it is very important to listen. It's important to listen to the problems of the industry. It's important to listen to the problems of the people who are in this kind of sectors facing, so that they can make effective policy making, so that these kind of problems doesn't arise in the future. And that is where I see my participation, that I can hear some of the views of you, some of the problems that you feel that the government might have to address, because I have the opportunity of speaking about them with the government or speaking about it in the parliament when a bill of such sort comes into play. So I would, as much as I was interested in making my own presentation or giving my own speech to you, I'm very much interested in listening to all the views of the speakers here, the distinguished guests, so that I can also learn some things from the industry and how it is going about and what are some of the problems that they are facing. So I very much look forward to the rest of the speakers here. And I once again thank the ICIB for giving me the opportunity to come here and interact with you guys, especially Mr. Manpreet Singh, who has been kind enough to invite me. I'm no industry guru regarding this thing, but I'm very excited about the prospects of this renewable energy resources. I come from a constituency which is totally rural. It's one of the economically backward regions in Andhra Pradesh, but I see the kind of effect renewable energy sources can have, because recently we have introduced agricultural bore wells which are solar based, and the kind of effect it had on the farmers, it was tremendous. And also, if you see the solar lights that can add value to the village panchayats. So these kind of technological innovations, creative solutions. So let us not just look at electric vehicles or the urban cities or the solutions these kind of futuristic methods can give to urban areas or the privilege. Let us look at the problems the rural India is facing, and that is where the opportunities also are going to be tremendous, especially for some of the investors or the business players that are here. I would encourage them to look at the problems that are faced by the rural India and try to come up with innovative solutions with these, because the economies of scale also can be at play at those areas. So that is where I would like many of the people here to stress upon, which is the rural India, which is the real India, and which can actually have a social impact also, economic impact also. And with that, I would like to conclude my address. And once again, I would like to thank each and every one of you for giving me the opportunity to speak here. Thank you, Manpreet.
Ramanji, thank you so much. I think your words were really very inspiring, I'm sure, for all the people here. And especially the part where you said, that it's the rural India that is going to be making the volumes. It's the rural India that's going to be changing the demographic of the country. And it is the rural India where it actually needs all these, when you talk about borewells or solar or wind or water generation and regeneration, sewage issues and recycling, climate issues, agricultural issues. These are some of the things that you really highlighted, and that is what is going to be giving the volumes and the financial viability to these businesses. So thank you so much for your lovely words, and I'm sure that you have inspired a lot of these people to ensure to look at these points. And thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I request you if you could stay a little longer, and if anybody has any questions, we'll be opening up the forum after a while. Thank you. Moving on, I would like to invite Ms. Brenda VanHorn, the Principal Commercial Officer at the U.S. Department of Commerce at the U.S. Commercial Service India. U.S. Commercial Service has got a unique role of bridging the gap between Indian businesses and the American businesses. It is the link, or it is the bridge that connects both these countries, which are halfway across the globe. This is something that we really need to understand from Brenda, how they plan to bridge this divide and bring together American and Indian companies in this sector. Welcome, Brenda. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon or good morning to all who've joined us from the U.S. I really enjoyed hearing the ambitious and forward-thinking and innovative programs that are happening in India. Thank you for the earlier comments. I want to say, well, first of all, I am Brenda VanHorn. I'm the Principal Commercial Officer based in the U.S. Commercial Service Office for the Western region of India. You know, we're one of several U.S. government agencies working here in India, and we and our agency are dedicated to promoting bilateral trade and investments. Our role is to connect Indian companies with U.S. suppliers and to assist Indian firms who are interested in investing in the United States. We really saw the importance of that during the last year of COVID impacted supply chains. So we're happy to be able to help there. But let me start by saying that I wish all of you and your families good health. Keeping people healthy and safe by providing essential goods and services has been our primary activity this past year. And we've been grateful to have such good collaboration and partnership with India. You know, like any good friendship, parties help each other during hard times. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. And over this past year, America and India have had waves of the virus in which we came to each other's aid. And, you know, we battled that pandemic together. So it is with sincere appreciation that I thank all of you who have taken time today from the valuable work that you do to join us. It's so encouraging to see our world easing back into normal activities. Indeed, today's topic is timely, as sustainable, renewable future is a key weapon in building a healthy planet that can withstand diseases such as what we've all lived through. So on behalf of the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. Commercial Service, I really want to thank our partner, the Indian Chamber of International Business, for organizing today's discussion. This event is coming on the heels of the G7 discussion to build back better. It's a perfect platform for U.S. and Indian officials, industry experts, and other stakeholders to share ideas to promote corporate governance and commitment to sustainable goals. You know, preserving and safeguarding our environment is as much a local issue as it is a global one, and I'm sure that everyone who's joined us here today has a story about the impact of the changing climate on your community and the steps each of us are taking to preserve the natural resources. You know, small efforts to preserve our environment go a long way. For instance, I was thrilled when I arrived here in Mumbai and learned that plastic bags were no longer in use. Imagine the impact of eliminating all those bags on the environment. I have to tell you, I've seen it firsthand. You know, when I first arrived, I walked by the ocean and I saw a lot of bags hanging in the trees. And if you go there now, not so many. So that's a positive impact that we've had. And another example, I have air dehumidifiers in my home. The water that I collect from these machines is used for watering plants, flushing down the toilets and drains, and even, you know, cleaning the floors. I reuse it all the time. I've served in a lot of really extremely arid climates, and so the idea that water can come out of the air is fascinating to me. And I'm really looking forward to a presentation that's coming later in this program on atmospheric water generation by Source Global, which is a US company that has this revolutionary technology. And in fact, this gives me a good segue to tell you how the commercial service of Western India is, basically we serve as a liaison to introduce American companies that have these sort of innovative technologies to Indian organizations. We work across all sectors to help businesses make the connections that they need to find environmental solutions and supplies for, you know, not just areas that can help in environment, but to help all industries and all sectors to make their businesses more environmentally friendly. So, you know, while we know that India shares a very strong trade, political and people-to-people connection with the United States, let me just take a few minutes to highlight the importance of this longstanding trade relationship. The United States and India have made great strides over the past decade. We've gone from 60 billion of trade in goods and services in the year 2009 to 150 billion in 2019. You know, we're not really going to count last year because the things that were happening sort of made it an anomaly, but things are already looking really good for the coming year. There's still plenty of room to increase fair and reciprocal trade between our nations, and that's what my agency does. And as most of you are aware, President Biden has made fighting climate change a top priority of his administration. And we recognize that we have to mobilize in unprecedented ways to meet a challenge that is fast accelerating, and we have limited time to get it under control. Just as to show you how important this area is for this administration, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, came to India as one of his first stops. And this underscored the important role of the US-India partnership in addressing climate change. We expect to see more of him here. And indeed, my agency is working very closely with that group to step up efforts to address the challenges that we face. And I can tell you that I have worked with Secretary Kerry in previous posts, and he is very passionate about this this topic, and you know, we'll work hard to get it done. So our agency's work addresses the need for technical solutions. India's successful compliance with its National Action Plan on Climate Change and the intended nationally determined commitments is closely linked with technology transfer, capacity building, and climate finance. The commercial service has designated Envirotech and energy teams as priority sector teams to engage proactively with the government of India, state level ministries, agencies, utilities, and pollution control boards. And we also provide advocacy support to US companies who are bidding for government tenders. And in doing this, we work closely with other agencies of US government, such as the Department of Energy, the US Trade and Development Agency, the Development Finance Corporation. In fact, they sit right around the corner from me. The US Agency for International Development, and also the US Department of Agriculture. So we work with them to help address and collaborate with our Indian counterparts in like agents on the National Action Plan for Climate Change and their programs for National Solar Mission and the National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency. Our teams actively inform US industry stakeholders by identifying high impact projects and commercial opportunities. In addition, we publish what we call market intelligence reports, which take a deeper look at market trends. And we create programs on topics that are related to climate change, such as decarbonization, emission measurement and control, ambient air monitoring, waste and water management, and many others, which promote climate resiliency and cleaner energy. You know, although we have been virtual for some time, we do facilitate trade show attendance, and we can't wait to get back to that work. As the world opens back up, we will resume taking buyer delegations from India to important water technology, waste management, and solar power trade shows and conferences in the US. You know, and when we do this, it really helps Indian businesses who are, you know, maybe unfamiliar with the American landscape. We help introduce them to American companies that are there. You know, we help identify the target audience, the programs that they should be attending, and so on. So it's sort of like having a concierge that kind of holds your hand through the process. In addition to organizing trade missions or delegations to go to shows and other in the United States, we also organize trade missions, bringing groups of US companies here. And that's to forge commercial relationships with local Indian partners and also to help them meet with government agencies. Some of you on the call actually may recall that we had a mission in 2020, just before the pandemic hit, And we had a delegation of water technology companies that came. They basically went across to India, but they also had a stop here in Mumbai and in Ahmedabad. And that mission was so successful that based on that success, we scheduled a follow-up mission in a similar area that will happen in the summer of 2022. And that one will focus on pollution control, air quality monitoring, and weather forecasting. And more information on that can be found from any of our colleagues who are on the call today. In addition, our infrastructure and mobility teams closely track opportunities in e-mobility and power storage, inland waterways and railroad network development for building sustainable transportation and supply chain models. And we've just started some really exciting work in advanced manufacturing, which will introduce new additive manufacturing techniques such as 3D printing, and advanced in composite materials and robotics and automation. You know, all of this promises to conserve resources, which will really fulfill our moral obligation to future generations and to those currently living, you know, in changing circumstances. As I mentioned, my colleagues are on the call with me here today. Jigna Mehta and Shamli Menon can give you more information on any of these projects and programs that I mentioned. And I understand there's going to be a poll after my presentation. So if you are a current importer of clean technology products, or if you would like to be connected with more suppliers, my office is happy to have some one-on-one counseling sessions to address, you know, whatever the needs are of your particular company. As the United States rebuilds its infrastructure with sustainable technology, many of you may be thinking about expanding your business operations in the US. Our office also works with Indian companies that are interested in investing in the US to be closer to their supply chain, for instance. We help Indian companies make those greenfield investments, so please feel free to reach out to us for that as well. And in closing, I just want to thank all of the distinguished speakers from the government of India and the other industries that are speaking, and my other US government colleagues who are here. I congratulate you for your achievements, and I do remain optimistic for the future, and that it will be a renewable and sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you so much. Like we said, we have a very short poll. We're going to start that poll. We're going to keep it on for 30 seconds. And I would request everybody who's attending to just, it's just a yes and no answer. We'll keep it on for about 30 seconds. I hope you all can see it on your screen. Just about 10 to 12 seconds more. I request if you all can just, it's a yes no answers. I request you to please fill the form.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Brenda. Thank you for being with us here today. It's great for you to highlight the special relationship between the governments of both the countries and what you as an organization are doing to support the businesses of both the countries. You're like a matchmaker for us. And in the Indian scenario, you know, especially when you get married, the matchmaker is the most important person in our lives. And I would say not only during the wedding, but even for the rest of the years when a husband and wife fight, they still blame the matchmaker for that, irrespective of what they've done. So I'm sure a lot of us are going to be remembering you for a long, long time to come. So thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. Moving on to today's session, we have our next speaker with us, Ms. Mehnaz Ansari. She's the Senior Regional Representative, South Asia in the Indo-Pacific region, and she represents the United States Trade and Development Agency, the USTDA. The USTDA is majorly in charge of all the trade-related aspects of the US government and based out of the US Embassy in New Delhi. Mehnaz ji, welcome to today's session. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manpreet, and thank you especially to you and the Indian Chamber of International Business for having me today to this deliberation, which is very important. And at the outset, I would first like to acknowledge the Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Kinjarapu, with whose state I must mention, as it was formed in 2014 until 2019, USTDA has, we not only have an MOU to collaborate with your state on smart city of Visakhapatnam, but we have also worked on the Anantapur solar wind integration project and many others. So very fortunate to have hear your discussion and seeing the outcome of the projects, which are somewhat evident as of today. Of course, my dear friend and my colleague, Brenda VanHorn, and her presentation actually set the right background for what I'm going to talk next. And I have also Anurag from USAID, who will be talking about the programs which are much more on the development side and larger, and USTDA takes a lot of cue from those energy programs, what Anurag and his team does to kind of bring in the industry and see the implementation. Of course, all the other participants, I'm very eager to hear from the companies and other academic leaders and others who have joined this. So have a very good evening to all of you. So as I begin, you all have heard from Brenda, and when Special Envoy John Kerry was here, and post that immediately in April, you all must have heard that there was a Leaders Summit on Climate, where India is a big participant. Special Envoy Kerry emphasized that many countries have contributed less than 1% of emissions, but suffer far more of the consequences, unquote. So this is the case for the majority of emerging economies, and where developing nations are often the most climate vulnerable, even though they are relatively low emitters of greenhouse gases. They stand to be the least prepared and suffer the greatest setbacks for climate change, which is why climate adaptation and resilience measures are even more critical for their economy and the prosperity and stability of the country. In US itself, the climate change impact has been very evident. The Texas energy crisis earlier this year, the recurring California droughts and wildfires, to the flooding and cyclones, which we are seeing in India, and the hurricanes in Central America are just some examples of the impact of what the energy use by mankind has caused to the world. And a lot of times, though the pandemic has made another significant impact to the lives, I think it is resetting the climate in many ways, as it is being said. The World Bank has quantified the economic cost of such extreme weather events at approximately $18 billion a year for low and middle income countries. And infrastructure investments can be part of the solution by adapting to a changing climate. This reduces uncertainty, risks, and costs relating to changing weather patterns. Therefore, in the Leaders Summit on Climate, President Biden launched US Trade and Development Agency, the agency which I represent here in South Asia, the Global Partnership for Climate Smart Infrastructure. We are going to be supporting development of new clean infrastructure in our partner countries, and India is amongst the key partner which has been identified to lead for the initiative to be led. And I totally agree that a lot of the initiatives actually sit with the private sector as well at the subnational level, which when I heard the Member of Parliament, when he was making his remarks, I totally agree that the impact actually lies on the ground, and we have to synergize our efforts of working on the ground as well as working at the center. The USTDA's Global Partnership for Climate Smart Infrastructure connects US industry to major energy and transportation infrastructure projects in emerging markets. This infrastructure partnership leverages our project preparation expertise. We are actually the funding agency which funds feasibility studies, technical assistance, pilot projects, as well as partnership building activities such as reverse trade mission to support the use of US technologies and services in overseas climate smart infrastructure projects. So as Brenda concluded about how US commercial service brings in the technologies, we are then helping the technologies try to get connected and showcase some of their expertise through the funding of these projects which we do. We are looking at resilient and low carbon infrastructure solutions in the energy and transportation sectors. The Global Climate Partnership will drive the adoption of transformational technologies that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and support resiliency to climate change. This initiative will create economic opportunities by leveraging public and private sector finance to catalyze the net zero transition and help vulnerable countries and communities respond to climate impact. I also want to briefly highlight USTDA's track record in climate adaptation, resilience, and sustainability. We have been active and we were since 1992 in India, and we have supported over 200 plus projects where sustainability and environmental impact has been an integral element of each project in India, which we have done. From sustainable and smart grids to improvise civil aviation and sustainable, smart and resilient cities for India, we have been a partner for getting the best of US technologies and expertise to work with our Indian partners on improving quality of living standards in India. Building standards for water and environment, renewable energy integration into the grids. You heard about the Anantapur example. We have another project currently which has been started in Gujarat. Sustainable master planning of Indian airports. You look at Kolkata Airport, or currently Udaipur Airport is under the study of how a sustainability element should be built in planning the airports, etc., have been the highlight of our recent work. Our partners, smart cities in India, especially Visakhapatnam, Ajmer, and Allahabad, have also had sustainability built into the core of their master planning of the cities. In fact, Vizag has demonstrated it well with its launch of first floating solar plant on its outskirts. Maybe some of you have already seen it, but if you have not been visiting Vizag, I would strongly recommend to check out their smart and sustainable master plan. Recently, we have awarded a grant to a company, a US company working with an Indian company to develop and integrate wind and solar technologies with battery storage in Gujarat, generating 300 megawatt of renewable energy. These are but a few examples, and there are other adaptation technologies in which the US is competitive, and we have been working to bridge the gap to get these technologies to India. Indian private sector and the subnational leaders are key to this success story. We have, as you have heard, US companies who can work, and I also look forward to the presentation by some of the companies, Indian and American, at the end of this, towards the later part of this deliberation, as well as later, of what we can do to bring in the best and connect the best with India. For example, some of the aspects which have to be looked into to build resilient and sustainable economies are smart grids. US is very competitive in the transmission and distribution equipment and the ICT software for smart grids. Smart grids allow for efficient, reliable transmission of power with reduced costs. Water supply and treatment. US is competitive in the following technologies: modular water and wastewater treatment systems, zero liquid discharge treatment, water reuse, desalination, water filtration, engineering, and design services. Adaptive water supply technologies can help LMICs adapt to climate change, especially countries facing increasing water scarcity. I think every other day we get news about some city running dry. And as I talk to you today from Bangalore, this is certainly a city which is always looking for more water supply. Emergency warning systems. US is competitive in control center and operating systems and emergency communication systems. Disaster warning systems are especially essential in countries to better manage risk from severe weather effects and help mitigate its impact. Then there are management or non-structural adaptation measures, which can be looked at by changing the timing of maintenance to account for changing patterns of energy demand and supply, investment in early warning systems, or purchasing insurance to address financial consequence of climate vulnerability. These can also include enhanced monitoring of existing assets to reduce the risk of failure as climate conditions change. Adaptive management approaches also include provisions to include flexibility from the outset to monitor and adjust to change. We can't rewrite the story. We have to go slow and make the changes in the management of our already existing structures. And then, of course, the structural adaptation measures of, for example, changing the composition of road surfaces so that they do not deform in high temperatures, building seawalls or using permeable paving services to reduce runoff during heavy rainfalls, building a bridge at higher height to account for rising sea levels. These are some of the examples of climate change technologies which US has expertise with several US companies, big, small, medium size, which can come and work with our Indian partners. You can be in the private sector, you can be at the subnational level, or you can be at the central level. If you're looking for a demonstrable feasibility analysis, you should come and talk to USTDA. For example, we are also looking at civil aviation. Since USTDA sponsors the US-India Aviation Cooperation, we are looking to work with our US Department of Transport to host a virtual seminar in August to examine the US and Indian aviation sectors for the impact of aviation on environment and climate. We are also looking to partner with proactive stakeholders to work with us on other solutions. We are open for proposals from US partners as well as with our Indian stakeholders to come join and work with us in this space. If you're looking for US technical solutions to improvise your business's resiliency and sustainability index, we can certainly discuss more. Once again, Mr. Manpreet, your entire team, thank you so much for having me today, and I'll be available at the end of the session for any more questions. Thank you.
And thank you so much. I mean, your information that you've given is definitely enlightening. I mean, the sectors that you pushed out, especially aviation and the climate change that affects because of aviation, and a lot of other sectors, 200 plus projects that you're working in India right now. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be much more after today's interaction. We have a lot of good stakeholders in today's meeting. And I'm sure that USTDA and ICIB, in addition with definitely the states and the center, are going to be doing much more. Thank you so much. Moving from the United States to India, it's my responsibility to ensure and to give on a dais the Invest India team. Mr. Saransh Roy, he's the senior investment specialist of the energy team and is going to highlight on the Invest India opportunities and the Government of India initiatives that are put out in today's times to ensure that India is the place to be for the world today. Saransh, welcome to today's session.
Thank you, Mr. Manpreet, and good evening to everyone, distinguished guests. It's my honor to sort of present to you the opportunity that the Indian renewable energy industry presents to you. Over the course of the time, I'll be traversing you through a very short presentation. Mr. Manpreet, let me know if you can see the screen.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, cool. So as Mr. Manpreet pointed out, Invest India is the Government of India's National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency. What it basically means is that we handhold foreign investors in a particular sector in India. So we have all the sectors under the Make in India campaign. We are the executing arm of the Make in India initiative of the government. So we target the foreign investors, make them understand the opportunities of that sector in India, and what are the government incentives that is boosting those opportunities for you. So renewable energy is one of those focus sectors of which I'm part of, and I'll be taking you through some of the opportunities enabled by the government through the incentives that it created, through the steps that it took 5 to 6 years back, which is leading to a renewable energy revolution right now in India. So India's commitment towards self-reliance in renewable energy started with its answer to the commitments that it made in the COP21 initiative, where it highlighted it on the top that it has to reduce the emission intensity by 35% and increase the renewable energy mix, clean energy mix of that to 40%. To start with that, the government of India started with two basic infrastructure initiatives: the National Solar Mission for 100% solarization of the country, and the electrification for all. That became the basis for the future initiatives that the government took in the coming years, in subsequent years, to make India truly self-reliant in renewable energy. India, following the commitments made in COP21, India set a very ambitious target of 175 gigawatt by 2022, scaling it up to 450 gigawatts by 2030 at full capacity. So some of the initiatives as a foundation to those initiatives that I've mentioned earlier were taken was the production link incentive that came roughly 4,000 crores of roughly $600 million worth of incentive has been now boosted into the manufacturing capacity to sort of boost the module and cell manufacturing capacity for the solar industry. Introduction of manufacturing linked tenders was introduced by the government, so that not only solar but hybrid as well as the manufacturing of the components can take place in India. Simultaneously, India imposed the basic custom duty on the imported materials coming from various materials to increase the reliance on the domestic industries in this space. And on the infrastructure side, the government of India started giving a very renewed focus towards developing the transmission side and connecting it to the solar grid and the wind grids. All of these four initiatives sort of started with an objective of making truly Atmanirbhar Bharat in the solar manufacturing value chain, solar and renewable energy manufacturing chain. So what of these initiatives had led to? It led to India became the third largest renewable energy economy by investments and usage, as per a study by British Business Energy Study 2020, right only behind US and Brazil. So if I translate this achievement of India that it has created in terms of the market demand, I see that India has the fifth largest solar installed capacity globally. India has now fully become the third largest producer of energy as well as a consumer of energy. And going forward with the various initiatives of the government, 39 solar parks are being added into this to boost this capacity. Roughly 23 gigawatts of that will be added to this capacity. So if I look into the economy of the ecosystem that the renewable energy in India looks like, it is three-tiered. I see the public sector, I see the private sector, and I see the institutional investors, the global institutional investors coming into this picture. The public sector here, the NTPC, SECI, Railway, Indian Railways, the states, they create the demand that is being met by the developers, the Indian developers here. And these developers then invite the equity investments that are coming from the global institutional players like the likes of Brookfield, Oryx, CDPQ, KKR, and Goldman Sachs. All of them have invested roughly billions and billions of dollars in this sector, in particular with the hopes of getting that asset return that they feel that India is going to give them. If I particularly look into the last 5 years, India has roughly received roughly $11 billion worth of $11 billion of renewable investments coming into this sector, which is by far one of the largest in a developed economy of this scale and size. Not just in the normal times, India's renewable energy sector's robustness and fundamentals were proven right even in the times of the pandemic. Even if I look into the data that's there for the pandemic, in that year only, India roughly auctioned 18 gigawatts of solar and wind tenders. That roughly gave an investment value of $10 to $20 billion. All of these auctions were given out to the Indian players who are backed by foreign investors, the likes of Oryx, ADIA, CDPQ, SB Energy, Goldman Sachs. All this means is that even in the times of pandemics, the institutional players has its confidence intact in India's fundamentals about renewable energy. So how, if I stretch it over the next 10 to 15 years, how it will pan out. So by 2030, if I feel that, okay, 430 gigawatts is my capacity that I'm going to get, at full capacity, India will look into roughly 700 plus gigawatt of solar capacity, 600 plus of wind capacity, 20 plus of bioenergy and small hydrogen capacity. All this will be enabled by a robust consumer demand that will be created in this space. High transition growth that will be happening from the non-fossils, from the fossils to the non-fossil fuels. All of these factors will play out, and India in the next 10 to 15 years will be one of the most important leaders in renewable energy economies across the world. So in order to achieve that scale, the government of India introduced its ambitious production-linked incentive schemes across 10 sectors, and renewable energy being one of them. So solar PV efficiency, PLI was recently launched. The bids are still open for companies for them to bid upon this. It's roughly $600 million worth of incentives that is purely designed to sort of increase the capacity enhancement of the domestic manufacturing capacity for modules, cells, polysilicon, and all the fundamentals that goes into manufacturing a solar cell or a module. So if I look into the truly Atmanirbhar reliance of solar manufacturing value chain. I see module and cells, I see PV and polysilicon. In all of these three capacities, the government of India has intervened and given boost through PLI, through various initiatives, through generation of artificial demand, like worth of 20 gigawatt worth of expression of interest is already created by the government in this. For polysilicon, that is the most fundamental element for creation of this product. 10 gigawatts of polysilicon manufacturing capacity will be created by PSUs only. All this will sort of enable India to become truly self-reliant in the solar energy manufacturing chain going forward. So we are Invest India. We help investors by getting them understand the right opportunity that is there for their line of investments and their investment strategies. Because we are housed in the government of India, we give you a right perspective, a right view, both from the central, from the state government as well. Thank you. Over to you, Manpreet.
Thank you, Saransh. Can you hear us, Saransh?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, for highlighting the stakeholders in this space, the schemes that the government has done and what they did a little while ago, a few years ago, so that we are where we are today. So thank you so much for highlighting this part and how India is still the attractive place to be when it comes to renewable energy spaces and the related spaces there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving on to today's session, we have with us the US Agency for International Development. Mr. Anurag Mishra is the Senior Clean Energy Specialist at the Energy Team Indo-Pacific Office. Anuragji, welcome, and we would love to hear what USAID has for India today.
Thank you, Mr. Manpreet, and good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. So let me just quickly share my screen and please let me know if you can see the presentation here.
We can see it.
Is it? Okay, thank you so much. So let me start with introducing USAID. It is one of the US government agency like USTDA, you heard Mehnaz, and US Department of Commerce. We have been kind of working in India for a number of decades in number of sectors related to development, and energy is one of it. And this opening slide, you see USAID and the logo of Government of India, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. That is where our collaboration on renewable energy happens. But the picture behind really demonstrate what we do. It's a picture of CII GBC, a Green Business Center in Hyderabad, which is kind of a great example of a partnership between a USAID program, the state government of Andhra Pradesh, and CII and Godrej Group to work towards and establish this new center to drive green building movement in India. And this happened in early 2000, and today India stands one of the largest green building kind of a space globally after China. So something which was introduced 10-15 years ago, now we have such a kind of a good progress made by India. And we see as there are similar opportunities across other sectors, including in renewable energy. So a very brief history, starting with 1950s, we started our cooperation focus initially on kind of really building the power plants, hydro projects, coal projects and all, and that was the need of the country at the time, to a stage where more recent programs are focused on a clean energy partnership, which we call as PACE, and also now kind of moving forward with a new program, which are more regional to really not just see that India enhances its renewable energy capacity, but also India's experience is used by other countries in the region, and we're able to expand that. And also through a regional cooperation, we can drive more opportunities for investment in India on renewable energy space. This is what our focus areas are. Everybody kind of knows the 175 gigawatt targets, and that is where USAID programs can work with Government of India on helping them achieve that. But I will say that most of the work which happens under our programs happens in the States, and you will see the examples as I go forward. And it also engages very closely with the private sector. While we don't really vouch for a specific company, we do ensure that there are capacities or there's enough opportunities for the private sector to invest and they feel comfortable in making those investments. Our programs also focus on energy access, and that's the development side of it, where we also want to see that the benefits of renewables is able to reach everybody, including people in the rural areas. And the last piece is to kind of enable US-India relationship and improve trade. This is one slide to really show the kind of magnitude of the program, or the elements of our program. This is a PACE-D program, which was there for the last 7 years. It directly kind of worked with states, directly worked with the private sector to enable 600 megawatt of actual deployment on the ground. We worked on training programs, which is also looking at training the DISCOM engineers, entrepreneurs, and other stakeholders on renewable energy technologies, and also help leverage huge investments. The program areas you see on the blue box, we enabled the Green Bonds Market India, bringing that concept in early 2015, and today India is amongst the leading green bonds market India, and most of the green bonds investment are going towards the renewable energy space, and we are now working on other innovative financing instruments. We were also able to enable a shift in thinking. So India has done significantly well in the renewable energy space, but going forward, I think there is a need for change of strategy. So earlier we were doing a lot of kind of a pure play wind and solar projects, but we're seeing that now there's a greater need for more system-friendly designs of tenders. That's where we started with the first hybrid project design for NTPC in early 2019. But more recently, we are working with other stakeholders to enable this space. I will give you a few examples there. We also worked extensively with microfinance institutions to enable their lending for off-grid energy access solutions and help 1.8 million individuals access clean energy solutions. And just to highlight, all of these individuals who are able to access these microfinance loans are women, because they are the members of these microfinance institutions. So going forward, we are kind of continuing that kind of relationship. And I saw in my kind of a previous presenter talked about Indian Railways, and in addition to Indian Railways, we also work with Indian Oil on creating the demand for more renewables. And we are working with railways, helping them establish the programs for solarization of all the railway stations. Now you go to any railway station, it has rooftop solars. But now our current engagement is focusing on helping railways achieve 100% renewable or 100% decarbonization for the rail operation to run the trains on renewables. Similarly with Indian Oil, for their facilities, for their operation, we help them kind of adopt the strategies for adopting more and more renewables. Now, a few examples of the specific thing which we have done in last couple of years. One of the challenges, as I was kind of mentioning, that as we start adding more and more renewables, the grid integration issues needs to be addressed, and that is where most of our current programs are focusing on a program called Greening the Grid, which is a very extensive program which identified kind of a national strategy for integrating 175 gigawatts and came out with some really innovative solutions. One of it was flexible operation of coal power plants. So we just not gave the recommendations, but we also worked with NTPC to really showcase that this is possible. And through a pilot project, they were able to achieve a 40% PLF of operating a thermal plant to kind of integrate renewables in a better way. There are other programs related to automatic generation controls, more markets, and that is another area where USAID work with the Central Regulatory Commission to enable the real-time electricity market, and that is going to be a really big game changer for the renewable energy space. Beyond integration, the issue of planning becomes very important. And as we heard, and we believe very strongly that India's ability to achieve its renewable energy target depends on states, and states' ability to adopt more and more renewable energy depend on how well they plan for it. And we found there have been kind of challenges with states' ability to plan for that, and that is where we came out with a very kind of a robust strategic energy planning tool. This is a state-of-the-art tool which we work for 2 states, for Assam and Jharkhand. And what this tool really did was help utilities to do a kind of a very robust demand forecast for future years, mid to long term, identify their current resources, and through a kind of different types of methodologies, gave them a best resource plan through which they can add more and more renewables. For example, for both Assam and Jharkhand, this really showed that the two states can go and adopt up to 5 to 6 times of renewable energy based on the business as usual scenario, while reducing the cost of power procurement by 10%. And that is going to be a biggest change, knowing that the distribution utilities are the primary buyer of renewable energy. And if they're not comfortable with renewable energy, they will not be kind of supportive of doing that. In addition, a lot of training programs and capacity building initiatives were taken up by USAID, including setting up 3 national certification training programs with Skill Council for Green Jobs. The other area of work is to create new markets. I mentioned about our work with Indian Railways to create more demand. And more recently, we worked with Solar Energy Corporation to come out with a very innovative round-the-clock tender design through which they have sought $4 billion of investment for around 5 gigawatts of solar capacity, solar and wind capacity, in addition to other sources of energy. 2 ideas I just want to kind of highlight. One is a focus on commercial and industrial consumers, how we can encourage them adopt more and more renewables. And we did an analysis on time of day green tariff for our partner states, and it really showed that by providing certain incentives during the time when the DISCOMs are receiving very cheap renewable energy power, they can incentivize the commercial and industrial consumers to go for more and more renewables kind of use for their operations, while also reducing the cost for themselves. We also work with the states to look into a new incentive programs based on value of solar, rather than looking into what is the feed-in tariff for rooftop solar or a kind of other kind of distributed solar technologies. What is the real cost of, or what is the real value of solar to the system, and accordingly the incentives can be designed so that there is a greater kind of a support for this. Other areas of work are definitely facilitating financing. USAID has a very kind of innovative credit guarantee programs which we implement in partnership with US Development Finance Corporation. There are around $100 million of credit guarantees available for distributed renewable energy with the Indian institutions. And very recently, we added another $41 million of credit guarantee for the MSME sector to adopt more and more renewables. So this is a very focused intervention for this. The other area where we are kind of partnering with the CIIGBC on helping financial institutions make their investment decisions and loans for rooftop solar projects, because they are not really sure about the quality and the safety of these systems which are getting installed. And we have established this national quality assurance program through a vendor rating initiative, through which the banks as well as the consumers can make choices based on the ratings which are provided by a third party like CIIGBC. Good examples of our work, which is to kind of really look at people at the bottom of pyramid or the rural areas. We heard Honorable Member of Parliament talked about this, and that is where we worked on 50 plus innovative solutions related to agriculture, health, education, and livelihood activities. You see some of the pictures on the right hand side, which is kind of really kind of bringing everybody together and making sure the benefits of the renewable goes to everyone. And we're really happy to say that more recently, this work which we did 2 years ago was really helpful during the COVID times, where our partner were able to establish a lot of health facilities in remote areas using solar technologies, whether it's a kind of a swab collection centers or kind of a small health centers to provide care for COVID patients and all. And recently, I mentioned this new credit guarantee which we established for small medium enterprises for this. We also worked extensively on kind of bringing the research institutions from both the sides together, and a new initiative which we call as South Asia Group for Energy is kind of establishing collaboration between the US national labs and the Indian national labs related to solar energy, wind energy, and biomass energy to work on some of the advanced solutions to drive investments and possible opportunities for a new kind of renewable technologies which can be supported through this collaboration. So that is where most of our programs are. I think my slide struck. So yeah, so this is the final slide. Just wanted to kind of leave this that we are now expanding our programs more regionally while we continue to work with India. We are also expanding our programs across South Asia through our 2 new programs and a recent initiative which we established called the South Asia Regional Energy Partnership, which again provides kind of technical assistance across different technologies and solutions. I didn't speak about our work on other energy technologies, but given that today's focus is on renewables, I just wanted to limit my discussion on renewables, and happy to answer any questions audience have going forward. Over to you. Thank you so much for your listening.
Anuragji, thank you so much. It was great listening to you and to see what projects the USAID has done in India. What struck me important was the projects that you've done in states like Jharkhand and Assam. And it's really interesting what the healthcare facilities, the COVID facilities that are using renewable energy, especially when you mentioned about the low-paying customers and how to make it commercially viable for them. Of course, you're doing much more on the government-to-government level, where you say regarding the discoms and the other things. But it was definitely something that I would look forward to and introduce some institutions that would love to work with you to develop such things, especially for the training programs. So thank you so much. It was great having you with us.
Thank you so much.
I would now like to call upon Ms. Alejandra Danielson Castillo. She's the Regional Director for South Asia at the US Grains Council. Climate has the biggest effect on our food chain system, and it's all about the food we eat, the sustainability, the renewability, and in India, we have a very unique problem when it comes to agriculture, which is the stubble burning and the pollution it causes. And there are a lot of issues related to that. So when it comes to the grains and the food we eat, so how does it affect renewable systems, sustainability systems, sustainable agriculture is something that I would like to listen to you from Alejandra. Welcome to us at Indian Chamber of International Business.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen really quickly. And are you able to see my screen right now?
Yeah, we can see it, Alejandra.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I'd like to speak tonight on ethanol as a partner in climate and economic opportunities to build and strengthen the US-India partnership. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about the Grains Council. We are a nonprofit organization working to develop export markets for US ethanol and feed grains, including barley, corn, sorghum, and DDGS. We were founded in 1960 as a partnership between US farmers, agribusinesses, and the US government. And we have offices in 13 markets with representatives in 15 additional locations. And we work, we create programs in more than 50 countries all over the world. We partner with the US grain and ethanol industries in more than 40 local governments and fuel industries to demonstrate the environmental, economic, and octane advantages of using ethanol in the world. In 2020, despite the decline of 26 billion gallons of ethanol production globally, the US remained the largest producer. This translated to the production of 16 billion gallons of ethanol and 39 million metric tons of co-products, which in turn meant job creation. Directly at about 63,000 jobs and indirectly about 233,000 jobs. And more importantly, we were able, through the ethanol industry, to inject around $18.5 billion in household income. So between the corn crop and ethanol, these represent some of the US largest agricultural industries because of its value-added proposition. In 2020 alone, a typical dry mill ethanol plant added roughly around $1.27 or 37% of additional value to every bushel of corn it processed. The US in 2020 saw its share of total global output decline slightly to 53%, but we still remain responsible for more than half of worldwide production. US ethanol exports were buffeted by a combination of the impact of the global pandemic on fuel consumption and prices, and by further ratcheting up of trade restrictions. But even within that framework, shipments to India increased approximately 15%, putting it as the second largest destination for US ethanol. And that is still the case today. Many countries are adopting biofuels as an option for renewable energy. And I know that we've spoken a lot about solar today, but I like to concentrate on ethanol, because among the many benefits cited, the following three are the top ones that we need to look at. Security. Agricultural products are renewable and grown throughout the year. So securing of the feedstock promotes a stable output that obviously benefits the entire country. Prosperity. Helping to promote the demand for agricultural products means more job creation, which then translates into economic growth. And sustainability. Non-crop feedstock like agricultural waste will be preferred for future biofuels and chemicals. Ethanol can be a low carbon fuel that will help reduce emissions. And we see these global ethanol mandates growing significantly throughout the world. So when we look at India, I would first like to take a moment to congratulate the government of India for their commitment in supporting and promoting green fuels like ethanol, from increasing sources of raw materials allowed to be used to produce ethanol, to permitting OMCs to sell up to E20 nationwide by 2023, which was an advanced target from 2030 and then 2025, to drafting a roadmap that can be used to achieve higher ethanol blends. And on that piece of higher ethanol blends, from the US experience, where we can attest, what we have learned is that higher ethanol blends options not only achieve environmental benefits, but can also bring prices down, as you can see from the pump on the slide to the right. But these latest announcements from GOI intending to secure E10 and advancing E20 by 2023 are great and much needed steps in ensuring that India meets its energy goals and climate change initiatives. Under the proposed roadmap, we see both opportunities and challenges remaining. It is estimated roughly half of India's 28 states and 8 union territories will be able to cross the 10% blending wall in 2023 based on current blending rates, feedstock availability, and future capacity. But there are concerns that despite the high proposed volumes, a maximum of 6 billion liters per year, maybe a little less, will come online over the next 2 to 4 years, given the financial infeasibility of many of the projects that are being proposed. Government of India has been working towards increasing ethanol distillation capacity through various measures, but even with large-scale diversion of cane juice and other raw materials to produce ethanol, it appears improbable to produce the required amount of ethanol to achieve E20 by 2023. In areas of deficit, such as South India, East and Northeastern India, as you can see from the map, ethanol imports may be needed to break past the 10% blend wall and reach E20. If we look at the supply and demand scenario for ethanol currently in India, India's total demand for ethanol far outstrips the supply, as well as its distillation capacity. In numbers, this deficit is slightly under 2 billion liters year on year, while distillation capacity sits at 3.5 billion liters under an E10 scenario. We know that demand will continue to go up, and the gap between demand and supply will also increase and become much greater when you're looking at an E20 framework. A two-tier procurement program may help India achieve its objectives quicker while safeguarding the domestic industry. And let me talk to you a little bit about what we mean when we say the two-tier procurement. Implementing a two-tier procurement program in India would allow the Indian industry to access the global ethanol supply. It would also protect the domestic sugar producers while providing incentives to refiners and oil marketing companies to invest in and modernize their ethanol supply chain. Procurement for imported ethanol would only be done after the tendering process for domestic ethanol is complete and there's a shortfall in meeting the blending target. This is where safeguarding the domestic industry comes into play. Another option could include imports of intermediate ethanol, about 3 to 4% hydrous ethanol, to be further refined by domestic distilleries, which are currently shut down during monsoon seasons. This would allow them to run year-round, which would, again, be a benefit, a direct benefit to the industry. Also, importation of fuel ethanol would also support India's Paris Agreement commitment to reduce total emissions intensity of its GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030. And I want to reiterate, the procurement of imported ethanol would only supplement whatever the domestic industry was unable to supply. Looking at the economics of this concept, domestically produced ethanol is priced higher than the international market. A blend of imported ethanol and Indian ethanol will significantly reduce the average cost of blending, which then gets passed on to the consumer. And we've seen this particular model work in other markets like the Philippines. And one of our speakers talked about the necessity of learning and adapting best practices from other countries, from other industries. This is one really great example where you can see on the graph that domestic supplies have increased year on year, while eventually leveling imports off. The Philippines was able to achieve E10 in 7 years from the inception of their ethanol blending program by doing a few things. Number one, allowing ethanol imports to reduce overall cost of biofuels. 2, tax breaks related to ethanol blending. Specific tax per liter of volume is currently 0 for biofuels components in the Philippines. Exemptions from value-added tax or VAT on the sale of raw material used in the production of biofuels. And high prioritization from government financial institutions to entities that will engage in the production, storage, handling, and transport of fuel and biofuel feedstock, including the blending with petroleum as certified by the DOE of the country. So we've seen tremendous growth in the domestic industry of the Philippines by adapting this particular model. So let's review some of the reasons why ethanol is a good partner for climate and the economy. Many individual plants have higher reductions, demonstrating that investments in technologies can further reduce up to 70% GHG emissions. Recent studies in the US place corn-based ethanol as having 46% lower GHG emissions than traditional gasoline, and these reductions are expected to exceed 50% by next year. Along with lower GHG emissions, the ethanol production process creates co-products, including DDGS, as a source of livestock and poultry feed, which I mentioned earlier was an additional revenue stream into the US economy. In addition, the carbon intensity of corn ethanol has decreased from 23% from 2005 to 2019, which that equals roughly around 544 million metric tons reductions in total GHG emissions. If you look at the graph, that number is 62.13 in 2020, only for the state of California. Even when the energy use and emissions related to the full production process are accounted for, ethanol delivers significant GHG savings compared to the fossil fuels it replaces. We also know of well-recorded human health benefits of ethanol. In addition to reducing carbon intensity of fuels, ethanol also reduces particulate matter and toxic emissions and replaces MTBE, which can negatively impact groundwater. Research has provided confirmation that at higher ethanol blends, you're looking at significant reductions in PM2.5, THCs, and GHG emissions and other toxins. So clearly the human health benefits of ethanol, higher ethanol blends availability in the country can be a significant reductor in toxins and pollution for the country. And ultimately, ethanol is the most widely used octane improver in the world. The boost from ethanol's octane rating of 114 points enhances engine performances and allows for more efficient engine designs and delivers less pollution while at it. So when you compare ethanol to other octane choices like manganese, MTBE, or lead, ethanol has well-known and understood human health effects. We know that it's not negatively impacting vehicle emissions. We know that it doesn't pollute our groundwater supplies, and it enables us to do this in a more economic and a more competitive way. And for the US, if it was not for the role of the ethanol industry in the nation's fuel supply, the US would have had to import nearly 500 million additional barrels of crude oil in 2020 alone. Ethanol is produced at approximately 200 facilities concentrated in the US Midwest, a secure source of fuel compared to other origins. So in short, ethanol is an essential tool for energy security. And as 2020 showed us, it also provides resiliency in tumultuous times, as well as additional revenue streams that can be fed into the economy, into our industries. And it's something that we believe India is really on target to be able to do, and we wish to see them do that as well. But more importantly, we see an opportunity on ethanol, which is already an industry that exists in India. It's already an industry that India already knows and understands and has significant infrastructure. We see ethanol as an opportunity to increase and grow the US-India trade relationship. Last year, while the mini trade deal did not solidify, we think that a great relationship already exists between our two countries. India currently represents the second largest market for ethanol for industrial purposes and our 14th largest market for US ag exports. Likewise, the United States remains an important market for precious metals and stones, pharmaceuticals, machinery, mineral fuels, and vehicles. So both our countries enjoy a strong relationship currently on defense, on climate action. It's been fantastic to see the momentum between the current administration and the government of India on climate change, climate initiatives, whether it's through the US-India Clean Energy Agenda or other venues. We believe, though, that this commitment to achieving climate change, as well as our long-standing positions on democracy, are a strong foundation for having a win-win scenario for both our countries. And with that, thank you very much. Any questions, we will be available after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you so much. It was really enlightening what the US has done in the Philippines and the blending model that you described. We are in India sitting at a 10% blending, as you already know. And, we are looking at 20%. And at the same time, we are continuously developing our indigenous systems. We're building up capacities. We're setting up plants. We're looking for global technologies to come into India and assist in the setting up of these plants. So this is something that, I would personally like to look at. And also, if you have any companies that are looking to have joint ventures in India, to share their technologies, to set up blending plants, and to look at all these options and opportunities, we would love to work on that too. So thank
Absolutely.
you so much for all this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would now like to look upon on the sustainability part and how India is moving on, or in the global scenario also, how CSR funds are changing the scenario, how the corporate social responsibility and the corporate responsibilities and responsible corporate people are changing the world and the environment around us. I would like to call upon Mr. Paresh Seth, who's the director of CASI New York, and he works on the CSR and the sustainability as an apex body of the world. Welcome, Paresh.
Thank you very much, Manpreet Saab, for putting me on the stage today. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure to speak at the seminar, along with so many esteemed speakers and guests. Once again, a special thanks to ICIB and Manpreet Singh. My name is Paresh and I'm a member of the board of directors at Castillo Global. We are basically from New York, but now we are present in 52 countries. We are probably the world's largest platform for sustainability. We also run the world's largest platform for volunteering. We believe it is very close to sustainability, CSR, impact, and related themes. So we started a platform for volunteering around 3 years back. Today we are the world's largest, or probably the world's largest, with over 3 million volunteers. So last week when I was approached by my fellow Rotarian, Manpreet Singh, to speak at this seminar, I had a look at the topics, and I'm a core finance guy. So my background is finance. I'm a capitalist by nature, and I run a sustainability company. So I was looking at the topics and I said, these are business models, or rather singular propaganda themes. As a professional member of the board, or as a professional advisor to so many boards, I was wondering, how do I contribute or add value to this seminar? I'm a professional board member, so I am on, I work with oil and gas, I work with EPC, I work with finance companies. So I don't stick to sustainability companies. So I was wondering, how do I add value to the seminar? Then I took a step back. And then I realized that fuel, water, food, alternate energy, gender diversity, they are not singular topics. These are, when we put them all together, this is a way of doing business. And our company Cassie is associated with over 1,000 companies across the world, across the 52 countries where we work. I also realized that each of these topics are imminent and imperative, and they put a lot of pressure on the board. So I would like to spend the next 3-4 minutes and talk about from the board's perspective. Now, when you talk about from the board's perspective, you're not only talking about the good companies, you're talking about companies in general. Because if you only look at the good companies, you leave out the oil and gas companies, you leave out the large mining companies, you leave out the fuel companies, you leave out battery companies, then you're left with a universe of only 10% of the companies. One cannot typically go and address them. So what I want to do is, I want to show the audience on what a board looks at. Because the board is the most important part. So the entire premise of my presentation is that it is the board which needs to drive the sustainability agenda. So historically, what was happening is, all the disaster management, impact analysis, labor relations, safety, scandals, they were managed by company secretaries and legal departments. However, with increasing complexities of ESG and sustainability, suddenly everything has come on the board's table. And the board does not know what to do. So these are business risks which every board has to address. Now, again, the board is in a very unique position to connect sustainability to corporate purpose and strategy. And the ultimate responsibility of the board is that its purpose is to have an intergenerational perspective, which is beyond the tenure of any typical management team. So how does the board look at? What does the board look at? What are the pressure points that the board has? So in the next few slides, let's have a look at how does the board create long-term value? How does the board look at the world? Because there is imminent amount of noise in the market. So as a typical board member, you receive around 60 circulars per year on food, water, sustainability, mining, raw materials, supply chain, value chain. So that's around 5 a month. Now you cannot possibly, a board member cannot possibly look at each circular. So it is handed over to the tactical team, to the management team. And it usually does not come back to the board. So if the stakeholders today, if all the corporations today want to make a board realize, any board, any company, realize that, hey, look, you need to take notice of this, then what should we do? What should these agencies be doing? So let's get on to that. I will show you 10 driving forces which the board typically looks at. Can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, so this is what the board was doing. 1950s, it was profit. Then a few years later, it was community profits. And then now it is risk management, profits, community development, and long term. So can we go on to the next slide? This is typically what the board looks at. There is a micro, there is a macro. On one side, there are ESGs. On one side, there is profitability, revenue per share, market capitalization. I said I'm a capitalist, so this is always on top of the mind. Share prices. So there is macro, there is micro, there are SDGs, UN, Europa, rules, democracies, activists. And on the other side, I have to look at supply chain, value chain, risk management, and the dollar per share. The next slide, please. Yeah. So this is typically how a board looks at things. And if we can put or plant numbers, if all these agencies today, investment agencies, alternate fuel agencies, climate agencies, agencies with singular agendas, can plant your numbers or forces here, it would be very easy to address the board, any kind of a board, a small company, a large company, a multinational. So these are typically the 10 factors that a board looks at, starting with climate change, Generation Z, government policies, and so on. Can we have the next slide, please? Yeah. So let's spend 30 seconds on each of the points. There are 10 factors which I have noted. The first one being climate change. Now, what really happens is in climate, when you say climate change, you typically think of oil and gas companies. You think of automobile companies, but that is far from the truth. Today, even beer companies, coffee companies, tea companies are subject to climate change and all the ESG and sustainability measures because it affects raw material, it affects packaging, and we shall go on to the next point where you see that. Generation Z, this is very interesting. My children are a part of this generation, so I find it very interesting. This generation, thanks to the proliferation of internet, has a very high propensity than any other generation before to work on social and societal issues. Now, this particular generation, the Generation Z, is also eager to show loyalty towards companies having sustainable practices. So if a coffee company says that we procure coffee and we ensure that farmers are being paid as opposed to another coffee company, then people of Generation Z will flock down to these companies. And that is what the board takes notice of. Right? If you just tell the board that you need to pay the farmers, the board will say, yes, oh, we know we are supposed to pay the farmers. But when you put it in this angle, then the board realizes that, yes, this is a part of business. And that is why we have to do it. Next slide, please. Government policies, all of you are aware, most of you are a part of the government. Pollution control boards, minority commissions, reporting, banned imports, anti-dumping. There are so many regulations going on. Every day we hear new things. Europe has made or is probably going to make reporting compulsory for all companies. There is a plastic ban in most countries, as much as in India. There are higher taxes in France for polluting cars. So the government is all about it. But how does the government really work? We shall look at it in the next few slides. The next one is very important. The funds and the investors are typically investors, and this is again very important. Investors need two things. One, investors stay away from risks. Two, investors are keen to invest in long-term sustainable companies so that they don't have to sell and buy again and again. Right? And that is why typically investors look favorably at companies which are sustainable companies or which deliver the promise that, look, we are working on sustainability measures. So that is why investors can force a board to look and change. Next slide, please. Early adoption by large corporates. This is pretty important from Europe point of view. We have a large presence in Europe, and we see this a lot. There are a lot of very large companies like H&M, Altran, across business industries, which have started churning out sustainability reports as far as 7 years back, 8 years back from now. They have very highly developed CSR policies. Now, what happens is, if a market leader, if a large company comes out with the sustainability reports, then it sort of forces all the other smaller companies to come out with sustainability reports. And then the peer pressure takes on, and then action is done because you need to write something in the sustainability report. So again, that's a pressure point for a board to look at, because they want to come out with a report, because there is a larger peer doing something on the reports, and that is why boards are taking action on this. The next thing everybody is aware, proliferation of internet, internet, social media, there is a positive PR, there are negative PR. This is very important from the government's point of view because there is so much connectivity. The government has to ensure that the public opinion is taken care of. Globally, we find a lot of instances where public hue and cry leads to the government coming out with rules and regulations on sustainability and CSR. Next slide, please. Activists, of course, NGOs, UN recognized NGOs, financial activists. To start with, or in underdeveloped countries, it's all about fair wages and inclusion. If you look at US or particularly Europe, you find a lot more, you find the activists doing a lot more on the ESG agenda and the sustainability agenda. But this is a key factor. The board usually runs away from activists' issues, and we spend a lot of time on ensuring that activists are happy. So this is again a pressure point for the boards. Innovation is very, very important, particularly in underdeveloped or developing countries. There are so many new products, lower cost, alternate materials, and this is across industries again. So apparels, manufacturing, cars, automobile, and as I said, you can see the last few generations shifting the choices to innovative products, electric car, EV vehicles, and so on. So this is again something that the board takes notice of, and this is a key factor for us to inculcate ESG in our strategies. Next one, please. Yeah, this is a big one, evolving supply chain and value chain. I'll give you an example. Imagine a scenario where you're manufacturing something and your raw material comes from some other country, and both of it is fit, but suddenly there is a rule saying this material cannot be transported on the high seas, and overnight your supply chain disappears. Now this is a far cry, this is a big scenario, but there are so many scenarios and so many real life examples of companies that we have been associated with on their supply chain thinning or supply chain disappearing, that suddenly the companies have to wake up and do everything else. They have to come out with new products, processes, policies, innovate. So this is constantly on any board's mind, even a large company, even the top Fortune FT 100 companies or the Fortune 500 companies. Every board looks at this every day or in every meeting. And if you talk about supply chain or value chain, then you can get your agenda quickly on the board's agenda. Next slide, please. So I have created a, we just saw 10 points, 9 actually, the 10 point I had written that human beings are good overall. I will not go into that. I'm sure people are smiling, people are happy. So these 9 points, if you chart out these 9 points and as per the board, so I have taken an example of motorcycles, bike, automobiles, apparel and a bank. Now, if you look closely,
Pareshi, can I intrude?
Yeah,
if we could speed up, that will be really nice. We are running short of time.
Sure. So, yeah. So, as I was saying, the government policy is not very important from a bank's or a finance perspective, but it is very important from an apparel or a bike's perspective. The supply chain is not important from a bank's perspective, but it is very important from a bikes and an apparel perspective. But early adoption is the most important from a bank's perspective. So if every agency plots which industry is being affected by them, then this will put you on the board's agenda. So with that, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is a typical actionable for a board. This is my last slide. An actionable for any board looks like this. Stakeholder agendas, governance, enterprise risk management strategy, and reporting. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but I would request all my panel members and the board members that I work with to start with governance. That is the key point. Next slide, please. Yeah, this picture is what I leave you with. This picture is worth 1,000 words. Please have a look at this picture. This is a market cap of $2.7 trillion US of the top 50 companies. This valuation of $2.7 trillion, 49% of it comes from the current cash flow, 51% of it comes from future cash flow. This 51% of $2.7 trillion can disappear overnight. because of carbon emission, air pollution, child labor, deforestation, water and health issues. This is what I leave you with. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This is Paresh from CASI. Thank you.
Thank you, Pareshji.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
So it was a very different perspective as we saw from the board's point of view. And I think this is something that is needed in today's times. You know, the amount of CSR funding available today is immense, but they're not able to channel it to the right channels. There's a dearth of implementation partners. There's a dearth of people who bring projects to these companies. They want to do it, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know whom to go to. I think this brought in a lot of clarity to those issues. And I think there will be a lot of take home from this presentation of yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Onwards with today's presentation, we now have with us, somebody who's going to give us a different perspective on clean energy and recycled water. I welcome today Mr. Kunal Shah. He's a global infrastructure executive at Energia Canada. Kunalji, welcome. We'd love to hear about your take on clean energy and recycled water. Welcome to Indian Chamber of International Business.
Thanks, Manpreet. Can you hear me well? And is my screen visible?
Yeah, it's clear. It's clear.
Awesome. So Manpreet, again, thanks for inviting me. You were kind to bring in a Canadian company, although we have roots in US too, to this nice event. What I'm going to give you is a prelude that why am I interested to actually kind of also share our views. As a company, we play in this space of water, food, and energy nexus. And at the same time, we happen to be one of the largest organic waste recycler in the state of California. So we have US connection. And then we also build a interesting waste management facility in the state of Goa in India. And from other perspective, I sit as the chair of the Singapore Young Water Professionals on Singapore Water Association. And I also sit on the board of the world's largest venture capital fund for water investments. It's called the Global Impact Water Fund. So from a perspective of water, waste, and food, let me just dive into the topic. What I want to discuss is that how can we have waste generating clean energy, clean water, and clean fertilizer. So here I am. I'm Kunal, Managing Director for Energia. Energia means anaerobic energy, any kind of energy made from waste sources. We've all heard about the water, food, energy nexus. Everybody knows about this. I'll not get into the detail, but I wanted to start the presentation by talking about that water, food, and energy is intertwined. Each affects the other, and if somebody gets off the chart, the other sector gets affected. All three are very vital for the survival of the ecosystem, including the human beings. What are the key problems which I have seen, and these are obviously disclaimer, is my personal opinion, but I see some of the issues which not only India, but most of the developing world and emerging economies are facing is garbage. We have seen a lot of waste. Possibly every city would have a nice mountain of garbage at the outskirts, right? We have seen rivers choked with plastics. We have seen landfill fires, landfills catching fire, for example, Ghazipur in Delhi, and Myanmar, Yangon landfill got fired. The second problem is air pollution, stubble burning. We are all well aware of. And then the picture at the bottom is not of a rainy season of fog in Mumbai, but the smog in Delhi, which is also caused by GHG emissions. And by the way, landfills are one of the largest emitters for methane gases in the world. The other problem is water pollution, pollution of the river bodies, lake, ocean, droughts, and our soil becoming more and more and more infertile. So talked about the problems. So I think problems lead to solutions and opportunities. And where is the solution? I think the solutions lie in the problems. And let me then take the opportunity to explain a little bit about what we do. So as a company, we are a Canadian company. We are one of the world's largest organic waste technology platform, having proprietary technologies and integrated solutions. of converting any kind of organic waste, so wastewater sludge, food waste, municipal solid waste, the waste which comes from your home, my home, the hotels, restaurants, food processing industrial waste, and agriculture waste. Agriculture waste could be the rice straw which is being burned and so on and so forth. And if you see, using proprietary technologies or integrated solutions, we convert that into renewable power. A lot of talk has been done on the solar. Great. I think solar sector has been the beacon of renewable energy. But I would like to point out that biogas and bioenergy and biogas to energy is one of the underrated sources, but it has a very huge potential because it not only helps waste problem to solve the waste problem, but also generate renewable energy. Bio-CNG, India imports a lot of natural gas, subsidized. Imagine there is an amazing opportunity to decarbonize our entire gas network. Currently, all the gas is mostly fossil fuel-based natural gas. When you convert biogas into bio-CNG, which is made from the waste sector, you are actually decarbonizing the gas network and thus helping achieve the net zero requirements. We create recyclables. I think our honorable MP on the call mentioned about rural India, and I think fertilizer is a big issue. A lot of chemical fertilizers, nothing against a particular sector, but I think there is a massive space and a requirement for organic fertilizer, and thankfully waste can be converted into that. Last but not the least is clean water. So as a company, we're headquartered in Canada, but we also happen to be the largest organic waste recycler in the state of California, and we're also present in Northeast. So we have a big US presence, some roots in Europe, and from Singapore, I cover the Asia Pacific market. As a company, we built about 1,600 anaerobic digestion or waste processing and biogas facilities across the world. We have an interesting presence in Asia. From Singapore, we've built plants in Taiwan, Korea, Singapore, India. Just a second, next slide. Yeah, these are some of the references of the plants we build. I will not brag much. It's not a marketing presentation about energy, but talking about the real sense of how waste could be converted. So this is what I think could be an ideal city or an ecosystem given in any part of the world, right? We live in cities at the center. The cities are supported by industries of various kinds, and then agricultural farms supply food to the cities, right? So imagine every city has wastewater, which goes to a wastewater treatment plant. Now the wastewater treatment plant, and I must congratulate India, has done a very good job on wastewater treatment as such so far. Hundreds of wastewater treatment plants built and many being built. But I think there is a bigger problem which is going to happen is that wastewater is being treated. However, the sludge coming out of the wastewater, which is the solid part, goes back to the same landfill. And when rain falls, that landfill then percolates back to the river water. So there is ultimately pollution happening. So this sludge could be converted to biogas, A. B, imagine that this wastewater is basically, in Singapore, we call it new water because every drop of wastewater in the country here, or many other parts of the world, is recycled. And here in Singapore, it goes up to drinking water. Or what I'm saying is that in India, there could be a massive scale for municipal wastewater treatment plants to be converted into industrial water or agriculture usage, which is the largest use of water. Then the agriculture farms, so rice straw we talked about, poultry litter, all of that could be converted into bio-CNG and fertilizer. Many industries, dairy, distillery, food and beverage, they have waste which could be converted again into bio-CNG, and the wastewater could be recycled. And last but not the least is that every city has solid waste. Imagine that solid waste is treated and you get biogas out of it, you can get electricity out of it, you can get recyclables out of it. So that's the ecosystem which we call a smart city and a smart urban setting ecosystem, which could be implemented sustainably in many cities in India. So another current approach, if you see, every city, whether New Delhi, Mumbai, Pune, Bangalore, Ahmedabad, every city has a wastewater department and a waste department. Generally, both the brothers don't talk to each other. Different departments manage these two entities. The wastewater sometimes is being treated, and then the sludge from the wastewater goes to the same landfill, and the waste goes to the same landfill. Because of this approach, a wastewater treatment plant ends up being an energy guzzler. So our approach is that can we make both these brothers talk to each other, but utilizing technology. So now imagine if there is a technology which can extract all the organic waste from the waste, I'm not saying to segregate everything entirely at home. If that happens, it's beautiful. But if that does not happen, imagine if there is a technology to extract all the organics from mixed waste. And thankfully, there is a technology proven. We have that. And this organics is then brought to a wastewater treatment plant, which is present as an infrastructure in many cities in India, and co-digested with the sewage sludge. You make more energy or bio-CNG, and then you also make an interesting fertilizer. So that's a solution which could be adopted as a smart city solution in various cities in India, leveraging the synergies between the waste and the water sector. And that's the technology. Again, I will not get into the details. I don't want to make it a sales pitch, but all these are available on our website. And if anybody has a requirement, feel free to touch base with Manpreet and we can discuss it further. I would like to point out this interesting facility in California. This is the largest organic waste recycling facility in North America, processing about 1,000 tons of waste and 300 tons of wastewater sludge and converting that into bio-CNG injected into the national gas pipeline, fertilizer, and clean water. Manpreet, just let me know if the sound quality is better.
The sound is perfect.
Most people, they throw their waste away and they think it just magically disappears. That stuff doesn't disappear. And what we do with the waste, how we manage the waste, how we separate it, utilize it, or underutilize it, actually has a big impact on our environment. SB 1383 is part of California's effort to force a very serious conversation about how we capture that organic waste and divert it and create a system where our organic waste will, instead of contributing to climate change, actually help us to solve climate change.
California has ambitious climate goals to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. And in order to achieve this, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, generate renewable fuels, and rejuvenate our soils. At Energia, we've built the Rialto Bioenergy Facility to achieve these goals. The Rialto Bioenergy Facility is the largest organics diversion facility in North America, converting organic waste into carbon-negative renewable fuel and fertilizer. The Rialto Bioenergy Facility is recycling the two largest organic waste sources in society: food waste in the trash and sewage. The organic fraction of trash is separated at off-site transfer stations where it is diverted from landfill and delivered to the facility to be converted into carbon-negative fuel and fertilizer. The organic waste is cleaned through Energia's organics polishing system, a unique technology that removes plastic film and grit that would otherwise wear downstream equipment and contaminate the fertilizer product. Once clean, the feedstock is fed to Energia's high solids and high efficiency anaerobic digestion system. Anaerobic digester leverages the most efficient machines on the planet, microorganisms that have evolved for billions of years. Here, the organic waste is converted into biogas, a carbon-negative renewable fuel. The biogas is cleaned and then upgraded to pipeline quality standards, where it is distributed to the natural gas grid and used as a transportation fuel in heavy-duty trucks and buses. The organic fraction that did not convert into biogas is separated into a solid and liquid fraction. The solid fraction is a nutrient-rich fertilizer that rejuvenates soils that have been degraded from the use of chemical fertilizers. About 1/3 of the Earth's soil is arid from the use of chemical fertilizers. By converting the very food waste that we discard into natural forms of fertilizer, we're able to put nutrients onto the soil to rejuvenate it and create fertile land. The liquid fraction is cleaned from a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant utilizing Energia's unique membrane technology and discharged for reuse downstream. In addition to the organic fraction of solid waste, biosolids from regional municipal wastewater treatment facilities are delivered to the facility. These biosolids are converted through drying that leverages waste heat on the facility from a Class B biosolid into a Class A fertilizer that can be used to rejuvenate soils. The facility is equipped with combined heat and power units to generate the power and heat needed to run the plant so that it is self-sufficient. Climate change is an existential threat to our communities. We are building infrastructure that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, generates renewable fuel, and produces natural fertilizer that rejuvenates soils. Come join us in improving our environment and healing our planet.
So that there was the Rialto Bioenergy Facility. And again, quick one, I think there has been some discussion here on carbon intensity of fuel. So just imagine that, yes, solar, wind has very interesting renewable energy, but they have a carbon impact. The carbon emissions when you make solar panels and stuff. But imagine if there is something like converting the waste which is existing in the society. It will get generated by human beings, by the agriculture society, by the industries. That waste could be converted to something which could substitute natural gas, which is fossil fuel-based gas, and decarbonize. This food waste to CNG has a carbon negative intensity. So I thought Alejandra mentioned about ethanol having a carbon intensity. So food waste converting into bio-CNG has a -50, -60 carbon intensity. Bio-CNG made from agriculture waste and manure has -100 intensity. So we're talking about not carbon neutral, but carbon negative fuels. And that's what can be done. And in India, we have abundance of waste. So that's the facility, as you saw, waste being converted into renewable natural gas or bio-CNG and electricity and fertilizer. That's the state-of-the-art plant we built in Goa, converting waste into biogas, fertilizer, compost, and recyclables. You cannot see any chimney because we're not burning the waste. Typically, when people talk about waste, they talk about waste to energy, which is burning the waste. I think there's nothing wrong in that, but what we believe is that the Indian waste has a lot of organic content and moisture, which can be handled in a different way. This is the plant we're building in Cape Town in South Africa, Africa's first MBT-based waste management plant, in Cyprus. This is a plant in Toronto, 200 tons a day of food waste being converted into bio-CNG. UK, this is a plant which converts agriculture waste into bio-CNG. So Manpreet, I would like to summarize, if I'm still in time, by saying that there is an interesting opportunity where waste, which is a nuisance, and wastewater, which is considered a liability, to be converted into an asset. And not only an asset in terms of economic output, in terms of recycled water or energy, but imagine the decarbonization aspect, the health and sanitation aspect. If there are no landfills, if there is no polluted water, imagine the health and sanitation benefits. So with waste to biogas or bio-CNG, you have health benefits, energy benefits, decarbonization benefits, climate change goals, at the same time an economic benefit, because this creates a massive industry. With that, Manpreet, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunal. Thank you so much. You know, I have a lot of questions, but and I'm sure the audience too. But I'm going to take it offline with you. We're running really short of time, so I request you to stay till the end in case there are any questions and answers from the audience. But I would now like to move on to different aspect when we talk about climate change mitigation. And for that, we have today with us Sandeep Goswamiji, who's a certified climate science and policy professional from the World Bank Institute of Global Environment Strategies. Welcome, Sandeep.
Thank you, sir. I am setting up my presentation. Please let me know when you see it.
Yes, we can see, and we can see your notes also.
Just a second, sir. Doing the required. Yeah. Perfect. Is that perfect?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Good evening to the esteemed panel members. I thank Manpreet, you and ICIB for giving me this opportunity. As my presentation unfolds, it would not only resonate with many speakers before me, but businesses, be it agro-industry, manufacturing and services, infrastructure and construction, and most importantly, finance and insurance, will be able to identify and align their thoughts as whether or not they need to incorporate climate resilience too in their decision making. To stress home the point, I use the example of Europe at the cusp of 2021. Between December 20 and Jan 21, the world saw most of Western Europe getting impacted by weather events of the varied types. If you look at it geographically instead of politically, we see that a very small area, we had extremes of flood, drought, heat wave, and cold spells. The image of desperate French farmers lighting fires around their grapevines to save them from ruin was seen around the world. The obvious fallout of such extreme weather events are socio-economic. The UNDRR has already pegged 2.97 trillion as economic losses in the last 2 decades, and we are opening a new decade with much more ferocity. Sorry. With floods and super cyclones leading the way, which may cross all records of the last 2 decades. And while it is easy to understand the direct economic losses, storms induce floods when passing through urban centers make the water a toxic mix of every poison imaginable. from electronics, petrol, paint, varnishes, industrial and residential effluent, which then flow downstream into our rivers and agricultural fields, and then land up on our dining table as slow poison, wreaking havoc to our immune system and regenerative systems. Understanding the seriousness of the threat posed by climate change, India completed its first near comprehensive assessment of the problem it shall face, and the findings should worry the business community, which at one end may be holding the intrinsic value of riches, but tied to the other end is the human and social capital, which is in the midst of life and death situations, literally. We already know of the 7,000-kilometer long coastline. Close to 6,000 kilometers is vulnerable to cyclones and tsunamis. 8.58% of our Indian land mass is prone to earthquakes, and 12% of land of India is prone to floods and river erosions. Therefore, the assessment report should be considered as a clarion call. Let us have a quick look at the future using the climate assessment tool, which I strongly advocate for investors and industry to consider using in their C-suite decisions henceforth. The graph points to an OECD assessment of 20 top port cities, and it paints a gloomy socio-economic picture by 2070. With Mumbai losing 1.6 trillion, Kolkata 2 trillion, and a combined population of 25 million in grave danger. It would be a series of events starting from now and not in the date 50 years into the future. It has already started to manifest, and in the minds of many concerned scientists who know better, the numbers may need an upward overhaul unless we act now. Mumbai and Kolkata, as shown in the graphics, have serious problems which needs to be addressed urgently. To drive home the point and prove the point without leaving any doubt in the minds of the public, let us quickly start adding up the loss and damage numbers given in the slide, and notice the geographical areas it affected. Vayu became weaker by the time it hit land, and the losses pale in compared to the impact of Fani. 1.4 million is to $8.1 billion. However, the losses which the country faces is always distributed evenly along all taxpayers. How else can they manage to take care of the weaker sections of the society? It does not matter if the infrastructure damages weren't as humongous in the West Coast. With Nisarga this time choosing Maharashtra instead of Gujarat, did greater damage of 665 million, but still pales in comparison in terms of the geographical reach at the cost of 13.5 billion of Anthem. There was no doubt that the devastation in the east must be repaired fast, perhaps by increasing petrol prices, or at the cost of stalling important development and projects and divert some money for repair and rehabilitations. But as extreme weather events starts to manifest with equal force on both coasts, as predicted and shown in the OECD slide, it can be seen that businesses in India must generate enough money to pay for their upkeep and have a definite upwardly graded plan for first mapping their risks and apply sustainability in their business as appropriate without fail if they wish to survive. While repair and rehabilitation from natural disaster is a state's responsibility, no government can work in a financial vacuum, and their coffers are filled only when business prospers. It would be an interesting case study for audiences listening to this to find what happened to the standing crops post the recent devastations. India is an agrarian economy. If we are seeing an overall inflation and reduced consumption and production, it should not be hard to predict the causes. A combined loss of damage of 4.86 billion between Taute and Yash, added to the previous 2 years' cost. And we all have to agree that not all can be blamed to the good governance and the pandemic. But there is one more dangerous dimension lurking, not known to most, that is the Earth overshoot day. The capitals, natural capital, social capital, and human capital and produce capital form the foundation of human well-being and economic success. Overexploitation of natural capital has tipped the fine balance of what otherwise would have been a natural weather phenomenon into more and more extreme events. This may be understood, but what we fail to recognize, as shown in the slide above, is that on one hand, we have already overspent and are deficient, while on the other, the extreme weather events now threaten even the regeneration of the natural capital. understanding the immediate challenges that threaten us and finding the means and the technological and intellectual wherewithal we have, there is still a chance to adapt and hopefully mitigate. And leading the way is the financial institutions and insurance companies who are taking companies and countries to diverge their sustainability plans under the Task Force of Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or the TCFD, which came along with the Paris Agreement in 2015. At a single glance on this slide, everyone is key that there is hope for all of us to recoup once this pandemic is over. Rupees 8 lakh crore is a handsome amount in addition to all other opportunities. But without reliable climate-related financial information, financial market cannot price climate risks and opportunities correctly. Understanding and owning this risk requires both the likelihood of high loss years and the diversity of events that could produce such losses, thus reduce the financial as well as the asset risks. Internationally, the TCFD, drawn up along the Paris Agreement, has become mandatory. In addition, companies which would want to either collaborate or grow in the EU, America, Japan, Australia would have to adhere to the corporate reporting dialogue to help in climate mitigation and adaptation measures. Many consultants are offering the climate change and sustainability service, which is able to provide near accurate disaster risk reduction reports for their assets, which then can be used by the C-suites to make their decisions. As a climate science professional, I believe what is measured can be verified, and the reporting and reported. Measuring physical assets, that is the financial materiality, to my mind is the most important, and that leads to a proper environmental assessment report. Moreover, if one has the knowledge of what extreme events can unfold in the immediate future, one can prevent catastrophe, even if a natural disaster does happen, because once one is forewarned and adapts the design and build of their assets with those risks in mind, thus they are a better position to mitigate the disasters. For example, an advanced warning report of a risk on groundwater depletion or drought or flood within the boundaries of an SEZ each year for the next 10 years in advance can help the industries to act in time. While those who would have invested in the building of the asset, be it the physical structure, agricultural produce, or a service, would find it highly interesting to know whether the loss and damage would occur before their return on investment or after, and therefore could advise the company to do a risk assessment during the initial construction stages rather than be stuck by a force majeure clause. To conclude, for a sustainable, renewable future, the idea is to build climate resilient, integrated, smart community is imperative. We can start with building our future urban centers with what is called the FEW concept: food security, energy efficiency, water sufficiency, waste management, and within a health bubble. It is easy to achieve within 100 acres SEZ. As a sustainable building design and consulting company, we have the concept and the numbers in place, and we are working closely with some of our US associates to create an integrated food park in India, and hoping that they will be able to close soon with the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep ji. Thank you so much. And it was a very different kind of a presentation. I mean, all of our speakers have brought out such innovative and different sides of the story. It's like, a coin not having two sides, but having multiple sides. So thank you so much. And I'm sure this is going to make some bells ringing. So we have two more speakers to go for today's session. I know we are running a little short of time. I now welcome Mr. Manu Karan. He's the Vice President, Business Development, Source Global. And his topic is going to be a little different. He's going to be talking about renewable water. So let's see if water can be really made renewable. So welcome, Anuji.
Hi, everybody. Let me just pull up my slides and then I'll introduce myself as well. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah. Can you see my full screen, or is it just still only the presentation?
No, we can see the whole screen with the side slides.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Manu Karan, Vice President of Business Development for South Asia for Source Global. And let me just start off with a quick introduction about what we do. At Source, what we do is basically create water from just sunlight and air. Right? This is a little bit counterintuitive or a little bit surprising to a lot of people. But what we do is basically tap into the abundance of water in the air. Right? And if you think, very few people actually realize that there's more fresh water in the air than on the ground and surface put together. If you can tap 2% of what water is there in the air, we can give enough drinking water to all of them. It's that high, right? And fundamentally, what we're doing is changing the world, because so long we've only been looking at water as what is available and how do we manage the demand side. For the first time, we can actually affect the supply side of these things, right? So that's basically where we come from. And just like bore wells, dams, etc., were the technology of the past century, where you had to come up with a way to access the water that was not available to you immediately. This is another technology which is going to be defining the future. A little bit about our company. We are Source Global PBC. We are headquartered in Scottsdale, Arizona. We're invested in by Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy Ventures, BlackRock Capital, Duke Energy, Lightspeed Ventures, and others. And at the center of our technology is the Source hydro panels, which look very similar to solar panels, but produce premium mineralized drinking water from water vapor in India. Right? So we are I would say we're a mixture of all the other topics that's come in from the past, which is solar and water. So we're a hybrid technology in that aspect. We are a PBC. The PBC stands for Public Benefit Corporation. It basically says that our commitment is to make sure the technology is available for social equity and not just focus on our profit. So that's our focus. Our mission is to make sure that we have perfect water for everyone, every place, right? Any person, any place. And we are aligned with the UN goal 6, SDG 6, which is clean water. We are already present in over 48 countries and counting. We have the experience in producing water in a variety of climates, from very humid to very dry. Right? And when I say very dry, our largest markets are in the Middle East, in UAE, in Dubai, in the deserts, for example, or Arizona, which is our headquarters, that's also a desert, and Australia. These are our three largest markets today around the world. And then now, India is now slowly becoming one of our large markets, primarily because we also have severe water stress, though we don't look at ourselves as a desert country yet. So, just introducing you to the technology. This is the hydro panel, Source hydro panel. It looks very similar to a solar panel. It's fully self-contained, elegant design, zero discharge, no input electricity required, no water source required. And it can be mounted on the roof or on the ground. As simple as this. You can go put one of these or many of these, and it just starts generating drinking water. So you can imagine we can scale it like a solar farm, or what we call as the water farm or a hydro farm. It's huge when it comes to the effect it has and scalability it has. Right? I'll spend a couple of minutes on talking about how the technology works. The Source hydro panel contains a patented hygroscopic material which attracts moisture from air. When I say hygroscopic material, it's a material that attracts moisture. You can think of sugar or salt as a hygroscopic material. When you open the lid of your sugar box, it gets lumpy by absorbing moisture. Same concept, our hygroscopic material, far more efficient on a per square foot basis. So more humidity is attracted to that material. And the attracted moisture is then condensed using solar thermal energy. Most people think that the way to condense is cooling, but there is also other ways through heating as well. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but think about it this way. When you take a hot water bath, the bath walls become wet. It's not because you're cooling the walls, but because there's enough temperature differential between the water vapor and the water. Right? So the same concept we employ. Once the moisture is attracted to this hygroscopic material, we basically heat it using solar thermal energy. And if I go back to these slides, you can see on the left and the right side, we have black bodies which basically absorb solar heat. Right? And with that, we are able to condense the water by when it comes in contact with cooler ambient temperature air. This water is distilled or demineralized water. It doesn't have any impurities. And then we have a fully natural process where we mineralize the water with magnesium and calcium using a mineralization cartridge, which is nothing but dolomite rock. You can think of it as something that we like your riverbeds has rocks. As fresh water flows over it, it collects the calcium and magnesium required for human consumption. Right? That's exactly the fully natural process that we do. And we have a small solar PV piece built in to power a pump that pushes the water of the panel. That's fundamentally how the entire panel works. And this is useful by itself or as an end. So if I were to tell you, what is the effect that we can do for a village or for an office or for residential, a bunch of things. Let's take some examples. Right? This is, for example, on the left side, you can see an operational array in the middle of the desert in Dubai. Right? No water available, and yet it's still produced. That's just an example image I put there for that purpose. But on the right side, if you talk about 1,000 liters per day for water, for drinking water, this is a large quantity, not for regular domestic consumption. In 1,000 liters, I can produce that anywhere between 120 and 160 hydro panels, depending on whether you're on the coast or in Western Rajasthan, where there's less humidity. So in Western Rajasthan, we probably use about 160 hydro panels. On the coast, we use about 120 hydro panels. It takes about 0.1 acres to 0.15 acres. That's roughly the space required. And per day, what this can do is support offices which have 1,000 people. Right? This small space can support 1,000 people's drinking water requirement. Residential people maybe 200, because for residential we need for cooking as well. So it's about 5 liters a day per head. And factories, 500 people, I would say, 2 liters per head. This is a minimum 15-year product, and I say minimum 15-year is because solar technology itself is a 30-year proven technology. The 15th year we need to refurbish the fans and the motor. So it's a couple of things that we need to change. This can produce relative, water at conditions as low as 10% relative humidity. No external power required, zero discharge. And because we have no external power required, the only cost is the cost of materials that's required for putting together the panel. And as our volume grow up, we are actually breaking the cycle between, or the relationship between energy and water that can be produced from the air. Okay? So that's how fundamentally our technology is changing the world. You are going to see more of this in the future. The problems our technology solves is basically purity and taste. If you think about every other form of water is fundamentally impure, and then from there we have to filter it to get to a drinkable version. In our case, we start at the other end. It's too pure to drink, and then we have to add the minerals, which is impurities basically, to get it to a drinkable version. Taste is fantastic because we can control the minerals. Availability, if X liters of water is what is available in a region, for a commercial entity, for example, the government puts a cap on how much water they can take, etc. Y liters of water which I can produce from the hydro panel is over and above everything that you can have in that space. Right? So we actually increase the availability of water in space. Local generation, we can do it on site, or what we call as local offsite. You can put it a couple of kilometers away and truck the water in. We are 40 times more dense than solar PV. So what would have taken 40 acres to support the same 5,000 people will take 1 acre. Right? So it's that dense. And because you can do local generation, you can avoid all plastics. And this is a very, very resilient technology, because if you think about drought, contamination, drop in water table, these are the single biggest problems for any facility or a village or residential. Right? Drought changes your water availability as much as, I would say, 50% year on year. In our case, because humidity and sunlight only vary plus or minus 10%, I would say that the hydro panels is a perpetual source of stable annual quantity of drinking water. You can create your own captive source. Right? And finally, today, RO is the de facto standard. The 20-liter cans are the de facto standard for drinking water. Your filtration plants reject 50% of the water, and then your 20-liter cans require another 20 liters of water to wash every time they recycle, right? So pretty much 4 liters of water going to making 1 liter of drinking water for us. If I can produce the 1 liter of drinking water directly from condensation, 4x the value of water is available now for manufacturing, washing, cleaning, etc. Right? So there's a whole value to it. And of course, most recently Forbes figured out that they did a study and found a lot of microplastics presence even in the top brands in India, for example, Bisleri and primarily because plastic as a container, it drops or it disintegrates microplastics when exposed to sunlight. So these are some of the key issues that we can solve. If the hydro panels can be placed on site, it can be directly dispatched, avoiding all plastic. Or if it's placed off-site, we can bring it in food-grade stainless steel trucks, which the dairy industry uses today, and again do direct dispensing from our special market. That way, we can avoid all plastic. So some customer stories for us. This is, for example, the largest desert safari operator in the Middle East, Platinum Heritage. They have tied up with us to produce all their water on-site at each of their desert safari locations. So completely infrastructure free. This is, for example, on the roof in a hospital in West Indies. They wanted high quality water for their patients and doctors, direct dispense to such a dispenser. So now we can create the water on site for them. Closer to home, this is for a bonded labor community in Atyanam village in Vellore. This is, we've tied up some CSR funds to help them get drinking water at their village. Otherwise, they had to wait for the trucks from the government once a week, and then they had to store it in pots and pans. So now they have clean drinking water at their houses. This is for a Zilla Parishad school in Bid district in Maharashtra. So here, the school itself did not have any ability to give drinking water to the children. They had to bring their water, and if the water got over, they had to walk several kilometers to refill their bottles, right? So now all of that is saved by us being able to produce clean drinking water just from the roof and directly dispense it. So this is another example from Philippines, Palawan, where there's a they had water but not clean water. So diarrhea and dehydration are the largest problems there. What we did was install these 40 panels, and we were also able to attract children to come to that school. 100 students as well as their parents in villages that come regularly to their school were able to access this clean drinking water. So this is the power of combining solar, I would say, and water, right? So we are able to do that, and happy to take questions if you have any. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It has been an eye-opener for me, at least, that such things are possible, to be very honest. So this is definitely going to change the demographic of India. And India, that there are many such villages and places that people have to go miles and miles for drinking water. So this is something that I would take up with you on an offline mode. And thank you so much for enlightening us today. It's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Moving on to our last speaker of the day, it is Mr. Jeff Greco. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Afghan American Chamber of Commerce. His interesting point of talking today is something very different. It's talking about the battery minerals and about the EV vehicles and how things are changing in the world of EV technologies and battery minerals. Welcome, Jeffrey. Pleasure to have you today here for our session.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Greco. I'm the President and CEO of the Afghan American Chamber of Commerce. We're very happy to be here today to join you on this conference on sustainability and a renewable future summit. And I'd like to thank Manpreet Singh and ICIB for their production of this event. We work very closely with ICIB in a number of different activities with regard to the US, Afghanistan, and India. And we're very hopeful to continue that process and that partnership into the future. Today, I'll be speaking about, and we'll screen share with you now, about sustainability and how the US and Indian business sectors can work together on renewables and sustainable electric vehicle technologies. Just bear with me 1 second while I transition. There we go. So what I'd like to start with is first a little bit of a situational analysis. The Earth is using resources at a rate about 50% higher than they can be regenerated by nature. This is due to a lot of different things: population growth, industrialization, climate change, non-renewables, pressure for energy supply commitments, and so forth. The biggest drivers that we have found for this raw material demand are really China, India, the US, and the EU, in importing all these different types of critical minerals and rare earth elements. The share of renewables in the power mix is only 12% today for clean sources, and 80% of the total primary energy supply is met by non-renewable energy sources such as oil, gas, and coal. So we have a real interest in pushing a sustainable energy future. I want to look at how we define sustainability, and I think Investopedia, the digital online business encyclopedia, really offered the best source for how we should define sustainability when it comes to our kind of business that we're working on. Sustainability focuses on meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet those needs. So an economic, an environmental, and a social pillar. But Investopedia identifies it as profits, planet, and people, P3. That's how sustainability should look going forward. Many of our global institutions and international financial institutions have already basically built the sustainability principles, and the World Bank is one great example. They have 10 corporate sustainability principles. They built in all of their bank business development planning, all of their programming, their financing and banking. They are completely integrated in the corporate sustainability into their program model. In addition, the UN also, since 2015, in the publication of the Sustainable Development Goals, also built in many. If you look at the 17 SDGs, more than half are directly about sustainability and renewable energy and renewable resources for the globe. So how do multinational companies, how does the private sector work on sustainability strategies? Well, that climate change and SDG agenda really has forced the multinational corporate boardroom to deal with, and I believe there's a revolution that's ongoing in those boardrooms. They're picking different types of board members now that believe in sustainability and renewable energy and so forth. They're developing corporate policies and programs that they can implement that reflect that viewpoint. They're reprioritizing their corporate principles, and their shareholder representatives are getting very active within the company to make sure that they're committed to these principles. So what has all this done, this revolution in the boardroom? Well, what it's done is create a larger focus for corporate social responsibility, ethics, and social programming, but it's also helped push minority and disadvantaged business partnerships, greater environmental protection, and more climate-friendly energy type programming as the company grows. So how do we become part, as business leaders, how do we become part of the electrification of global mobility and transportation? In the US, most of our automakers now have electric vehicle programs within their organizations. They were slow to the hybrid vehicle technology, but now they're rapidly picking up, and there's a real revolution going on in these companies, automobile companies. They want to be 100% electric within 10, 15, 20 years, and they're making the investment commitments now to do just that. The biggest obstacle that they have faced is on the lithium-ion battery development, but they've already made huge strides in that development, and they're now going into the standardization of lithium-ion battery production for us long-term. You're going to see the end of the internal combustion engine, I believe, in our lifetime, and things will move very rapidly after that to build these supply chains. So I'm recommending a 4-point plan. First, for us to collaborate better and partner better in these electric transportation sectors. We want to identify the major EV manufacturers in the US and Canada first. I've given you a list here in what their commitments have been in terms of electric vehicles, both within India and the US. You need to know the companies because you're going to need to contact them. Step 2, we want to organize, and ICIB, I'm sure, will be leading this with Manpreet. They want to organize more virtual and in-person, depending on your COVID infection rate in your country, in-person visits to major electric vehicle manufacturers and trade shows. We can help put those together with our chambers. We can also encourage the government of India, and you should encourage your government to help incentivize more industry events around the electric vehicle market. We want to get the US and the Indian government to sign partnership agreements to co-host bilateral conferences on electric vehicle industrialization, business matchmaking, partnerships, etc. And your chamber should be very active in that. Step 3, we want to focus both on trade and on investment aspects of EV industrialization. The trade event should be focused on helping Indian manufacturers to be interested in being part of the supply chain, both in India and in the US for their electric vehicle programs. And likewise, US manufacturers should want Indian EV market manufacturers to partner with them on future possible electric vehicle investments in India. So the government of India has a role both in trade and investment to help incentivize and bring us together as industries, and we hope that they will start to do that. On the investment side, especially with lithium-ion battery development, we need to develop supply chains alternative to China because they're using it for their own industry now and are cutting off partners like India and other nations from their supplies. So lithium is available in Afghanistan, both in brine and in hard rock. There's a great opportunity there for India and Afghanistan to sign long-term resource agreements on lithium for the battery market development, which we strongly encourage. Our last point, step 4, is you need to have better advocacy for market incentives. So we want to see tax incentives, duty-free export and import incentives, tax exemptions, development assistance programming, bilateral resource agreements between 2 partner states. There might be a standardization of EV infrastructure, especially the charging infrastructure, so we can start promoting that. And we need to start training a whole new generation of vocational training and technical training on how to repair electric vehicles. So in closing, let me just say what the Ford chairman said to all of his corporate presidents some time ago, that in order for the company to continue, it has to be driven not just by its financial performance, but by a social purpose, a process where they show how they're making a positive contribution to society. I think the electric vehicle market, the electric mobility market, and the lithium-ion battery market represent for India, the United States, and Afghanistan a great place to start and for future generations to show their appreciation to you. That's it for me today. I wish you all the best, and thank you to Manpreet and his team, and I hope you have a great conference. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. As you rightly mentioned, we've been working for quite a few years now together on various technologies and various aspects of trade. So we'd love to keep doing that. And with this, I would like to say that we are at the end of today's session. And if there are any questions or answers, please feel free to put them on the chat box, which we can share with the relevant speakers. I'm afraid we won't have much time to take direct questions because we've really overshot time. This is one of the largest and the longest sessions that at least I have sat across. But we'll take 1 or 2 quick questions. I'm opening up the session for everyone. If you can just hold on. So if there are any questions, you can just unmute yourself, introduce yourself, ask your question. Anyone, any questions? So I guess there's no questions for the day.
Yeah, Manpreet.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, this is Karthik.
Yeah, Karthik.
You know, what I find absolutely, weird, or let's say, not appropriate. I've been watching through all these sessions. There were some fantastic sessions that came through. But look at the number of participants. They were just constantly declining. So the thing is, a lot of times I feel that I try to tell myself whether we get into TCFD consulting or any such activity. I mean, where is the interest of people? I mean, jab baad aayegi tab, they will start thinking about something. So I think, it's quite a bad thing. Not really a question, but if anybody wants to contribute, why are the people so hostile to these kind of climate mitigation measures, or all the things that all the panelists and speakers have been talking about today all along?
So, you're right on that part. And I think, you'll be surprised the number of registrations had crossed 200. So that is really interesting. So we were pretty excited about it. And we started with about 50 odd participants today, and we are at about 21. So definitely that does show something. But then I guess it extended quite a bit. Instead of 2 hours, it went on to nearly 3 hours now. So people have their family commitments, and it's a late evening for India. It's early morning for the US, and it's definitely late night for Singapore. So maybe that was one of the reasons. But definitely we will be sharing this recording to all the participants, to all the people who had registered, and I'm sure they'll find a lot of value in that.
No,
so
it's a brilliant event. Thank you. Brilliant event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Loved hearing everybody.
Sheetalji, you can unmute yourself and ask. Any questions, Sheetalji? You raised your hand. Okay, so I guess that's the end of today's session. I would really like to thank all our partners that were there with us today, all our speakers, and a big thank you to our guest of honor for today's session, Shri Naidu ji, the Member of Parliament, Ms. Brenda VanHorn, Principal Commercial Officer at the US Department of Commerce, US Commercial Service, India. A big thank you to Ms. Mehnaz Ansari, the Senior Regional Representative, South Asia, and the United States Trade and Development Agency. Thank you to Invest India and Mr. Saransh Roy, who is there with us today. Thank you, Anurag ji from USAID. A big thank you to Alejandra, who joined in from Singapore, from the US Grains Council. Thanks to Paresh ji, who's based out of Mumbai, but gave us a completely different aspect of CSR and sustainability. A big thank you to Kunal too, who showed us how waste is being processed all over the world in a very different manner, unlike what we've seen in India. Sandeep ji gave us what really needs to be done, and like one of our viewers, Karthik ji, pointed out, jab baad aayegi tab dekhenge. So we'll cross the bridge when we reach it, which might not be such a great attitude towards our climate change. But that being said, thank you, Sandeep ji, for pointing it out to us and bringing the reality. Manu Karan from the Source Global showed us something which is completely different today. I have never seen such a technology till date, and I'm sure that India can gain a lot when it comes to such things. So big thank you to Manu Karan for being with us today, and big thank you to Source Global also for showing us this technology. And Jeff Rico, my dear friend, President and CEO of Afghan American Chamber of Commerce. A big thank you to all our partners, US Grains Council, USTDA, US Department of Commerce, US Embassy in India, USAID, and US Commercial Service. A big thank you to all of us, and especially to Invest India for being with us. With this, we'd like to end our session today. Hoping to see you next time very soon.
Thank you very much, Manpreet. Thank you.
Yeah, Manpreet, Sheetal here.
Yeah, Sheetal.
Can you give me a few seconds? Yeah, thank you so much.
Please.
My video got hanged because from 3-4 hours we are